Good afternoon, everyone. We have a quorum of members present this afternoon, and the New York City Board of Correction, June 13th, 2023 meeting is now in session. Our first order of business to vote on the agenda for today's board meeting, which board members have received. Will a board member move to vote to approve the June 13th, 2023 meeting and agenda? The motion has been moved and seconded. All in favor of the, opposed? One abstention. Does any member have edits or comments on the agenda?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I believe in the absence of the Department of Correction at today's meeting, it is appropriate to lay over two items on the agenda under board member discussion items. They are items about which board members have a number of questions for the Department of Correction, and I believe it's appropriate to hold those until such time as the commissioner is able to join us for a meeting.
That would be, just for clarification, that would be item 8?
Item 8A and B.
Item 8A and B. Just the Board of Correction, is the Board of Correction in concurrence? Are you prepared to answer questions in the absence of the commissioner? That being said, we will take a motion to remove or postpone items 8A and B until the Commissioner of Correction is available to respond.
I do want to, your chair. I'm in agreement with postponing 8B, but I think the desire or the effectiveness of July 1 of the 17 million around the programs and contracts at least has to be discussed on what this board can do to halt that, because if we wait till the July 1st, that has already went into effect, which actually makes that conversation obsolete. Or am I misunderstanding that?
No, I support that.
Okay, so if there is a motion or consensus from the board, but I will take a motion to remove item 8A from today's agenda until the commissioner is available.
I think that was 8B.
8B, to remove 8B, and 8A stays on the agenda for today.
I'll motion to defer discussion of item 8B until the commissioner is able to attend the meeting, hopefully in July, and to keep 8A on the agenda, and otherwise keep the agenda as is.
A second.
There is a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor? By show of hands, all in favor? Okay. Okay, 3 abstentions. The motion passed. Sorry.
I wasn't aware that they were.
I don't think an abstention is a disagreement. It's just an abstention to the vote. That being said, the motion has passed. On to the next item. Our second order of business is a vote on draft minutes for the May 16th, 2023 board meeting and the June 5th, 2023 emergency board meeting. Board members have received. Will a board member move to vote to approve the May 16th, 23 meeting minutes, to approve the June 5th, 2023 emergency meeting minutes?
You gonna finish reading?
I did finish my statement.
I make a motion that we actually approve the May 16, 2023 meetings, approve the June 5th, 2023 emergency meetings to ratify the actions described in the May 16, 2023 and June 5th, 2023 meetings.
Seconded.
There's been a motion, and then there's been a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Abstain. How many abstentions were there? 3 abstentions. The motion does pass. We will now hear public comment from people in custody. Board staff has implemented captioning technology to enhance the listener experience and ensure testimony from people in custody is accessible to all attendees. Closed captioning and/or transcription is being provided solely for the convenience of our viewers. The accuracy of the machine-generated captions varies depending on audio quality and the cadence of the speaker. The Board of Correction does not guarantee the accuracy of completeness of the closed caption.
My name is Regina Norman. I'm a frozen singer. My first complaint is the fact that I was not allowed to go to my mother's funeral. I'm a U.S. citizen. My classification is a 2. I have no history of violence. My charge is a grand larceny charge. I've been in custody. I have no infractions. I have nothing. Yet social service approved me to make either to go to the wake or to attend the funeral. Yet I was not taken to either one. The funeral was streamlined. I was not given access to that. Nobody to date has not told me why I was not taken to that funeral. I was denied, which was basic reason for everything else in here, that you never have staff and you don't care to spend the money for anybody. You keep doing that when people...
Are there any statements that is the only PIC statement that we have? Thank you all who left public comments or dedicated lines for people in custody. We will now hear from DOC and CHS staff members, or our charter authority covers people in custody and jail staff, so I've decided to dedicate time for those groups to speak separate from the general public. Looks like Robert Gonzalez, is it? Yes, sir. Okay, so then, no, that's, I think the list you signed was for public comment. Okay, so that's an error. And Ron Edwards, was that? Okay, that is an error, so we'll disregard that. Any public and remove that from the record. I'll have Jasmine Gillis, present now.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have a packed agenda. So I'm going to start with giving the update on deaths since the board's last meeting. Is it on? Okay. Thank you. So Mr. Rubu Zhao, 52, died by suspected suicide in Elmhurst Hospital after jumping from the second floor of a housing area in GRVC. Autopsy results show that his cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Joshua Valles, 31, died on May 27, 2023. Mr. Valles was admitted to Elmhurst Hospital on May 19, 2023, after which he was found by Elmhurst staff to have extensive anoxic brain injury and minimal brain function. His bail status was modified and he was released on his own recognizance on May 24, 2023. We express condolences for Mr. Zhao and Mr. Valles' families and loved ones. And the board is actively investigating these deaths and will issue a final report on our findings. Next, the board expresses condolences for the deaths of department staff since our last meeting in May. They are Stationary Engineer Daniel Lake, Officer Michael Cassiano, Retired Captain Edward Cruz, Retired Captain Ronald Newells, Retired Officer Darrell Delancey Sr., Retired Officer Johir Mia, Retired Captain Jose Rosa, Retired Officer Walter Romero, Retired Officer Herbert Evans, and Retired Officer Jimmy Lee Wilson. And we want to share our deepest condolences with the families of the deceased. We also want to state that violence resulting in serious injury to people in custody or to staff working in the jails is of great concern to the board, and we will continue to investigate incidents that are brought to our attention. The next update we have is on the census numbers. As of June 12, 2023, the total census of people in custody is 6,085. And for comparison, the monthly average census for March was 5,912. For April, it was 5,942. And for May, it was 6,018. And broken down by facility, as of June 12th, AMKC housed 1,910 people in custody. Bellevue housed 41. EMTC housed 943. GRVC housed 858. NYC housed 176 with 95 people in custody in the infirmary. RMSC housed 370. RNDC housed 909. VCBC housed 713, and West Facility housed 70. And finally, we have an announcement regarding our reports. On May 26, 2023, the Nunez Independent Monitor issued a special report which detailed 5 recent incidents involving serious, life-altering, and life-ending injuries experienced by people in custody, and expressed serious concern about departmental reporting, deficiencies, dangerous conditions in the main intake at an EMTC, and transparency in the provision of information to the monitoring team. In light of the monitor's latest reports, board staff will delay the release of its next serious injury report to further investigate and incorporate findings related to the incidents highlighted by the independent monitor. Board staff will also measure and report on the department's remedial efforts to increase safety and improve its serious injury reporting practices.
Thank you for that report. We will now hear a public comment from the general public. The first speaker will be Andre Ward. Yes, please.
Begin now? Should I begin? Yes, please. Good afternoon, Chair Sampson and members of staff of the Board of Corrections. My name is Andre Ward. I'm the Associate Vice President of Policy at the Fortune Society's David Rothenberg Center for Public Policy. We're a 55-year-old organization that offers reentry services and does advocacy work for people impacted by the criminal legal system. Collectively, we serve roughly 1,700 people every day across 179 units in 6 Rikers facilities and the Vernon C. Brain Center. We have not yet heard any evidence that DOC has a plan to replicate our services starting on July 1st. This is a matter that falls within the purview of the Board of Correction because DOC is required by law to provide 5 hours of programming daily to the people in its custody. This mandate exists because, as is well known, and Commissioner Molina has stated in many ways on numerous occasions, programming offered by community-based providers promotes safety for everyone in our city jails, for those who work there as well as those held there. As someone who has spent 3.5 years on Rikers Island decades ago, I can also attest to the dangerous conditions that arise in jails when there is inadequate programming. Culturally competent community-based providers with decades of experience who are known and trusted by well-deserved reputations cannot be replaced by even the most well-trained and well-meaning DOC staff. They cannot build the kinds of trusting relationships with people in custody necessary for true engagement. We can quantify the numbers of group sessions, the types of hard-trained skills and certifications that provide pathways to employment, the family day events, and other incentives we provide. But we cannot quantify the way in which our work inside jails impacts the entire atmosphere, helping to promote stability and calm. This happens not just because we reduce idle time, keeping people occupied and focused, but also because we provide hope and an antidote to despair. Our staff also spend countless hours speaking with individuals outside of group sessions, offering emotional support. We provide people with an outlet to avoid conflict and clear sight line to their futures upon release, all of which will be lost just within a few weeks from now. Eliminating our program inside the jails will also break the continuum of care that we provide to our people once they're released. The continuum is critical to individual successful reentry and our collective public safety. By its very definition, DOC cannot offer post-release transitional services in the community. People who have engaged with us while in our jails are 5 times more likely to enroll in some form of services within Fortune after being released than are people who did not work with us while in jail. Another analysis showed that approximately 400 of the people enrolled in our community-based transitional services within the past 12 months were previously engaged with us in our jails within the 60 days immediately prior to enrollment. That is just looking at the people who came to us within the 60 days. Through our one particular program, hundreds more come to us every year who first work with us in jails during other time frames, including upon release. And as I close, for all these reasons, and as the humanitarian crisis in our jails continues unabated, we urge this board to ensure that DOC invests in the programs and services that not only fulfill DOC's programmatic mandate, but that truly promote safety and well-being inside our city jails, beyond, and for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Sure.
For how many years has the Fortune Society been providing programs at DOC?
It's been well over a decade that we've been serving people on Rikers Island.
10 years?
I don't have the exact number, sir, but we've been serving people well over a decade on Rikers Island. We've been working with people there. Sure. Any other questions?
You talk a lot about how working with with inmates inside is an important part of how you continue to provide services. Can you talk about the services you are uniquely offer, like housing, employment? Can you talk about the services that are available?
Sure. And we, of course, refer to people that are detained on Rikers Island, not as inmates, but as people who are detained on Rikers Island.
Thank
just
you.
to kind
Sorry
of
about that.
qualify that. But certainly, people who are released to our engagement in the society and in our services are able to access a different amount of services. We have a wide suite of services ranging from mental health to substance use treatment, to employment, job readiness training, to education. And when they come through our doors, our folk who are working with them on Rikers, they're able to access all of those things, leading them to live a life of contribution because they access our services. We offer housing to people, emergency, transitional, and permanent supportive housing to people who've been impacted by the criminal legal system, some of whom are coming off of Rikers Island. So our services are really critical to people who are coming off of Rikers Island, and that process starts while we are in fact working with them while they're on Rikers.
Do you know how the Department of Correction is going to provide
Excuse
services?
me, I did allow 2 questions that were pretty balanced, but we have 10 speakers on this list in the issue of time, because these are public comments, not questions. And I think there was balance since Mr.
Okay,
Ramos.
I can answer the Department of Corrections when the.
Yes, that'll be fine. Thank you. Thank you. Second speaker is Ms. Ashanti Anton.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Asaki Antoine. I am the 3rd Vice President of the Correctional Officers Benevolent Association. I'm going to provide you with some updates, and my hope is that the information that I give to you all follow up collectively. Each and every one of you follow up. Since last month's meeting, physical assaults on correctional officers have increased. May 16th, at the EMTC Center, a female correctional officer was stabbed numerous times in the neck by a male inmate, who I may add belonged in a gang. Could you imagine the fear she faced that day? As she defended herself and fought off her attacker, she received 10 stitches to the neck area to close that wound. This unprovoked attack left her scared and scarred for life. On June 3rd, another physical assault on an officer. He was brutally beaten by an inmate as he tried to escort the inmate out of the area for committing an act of violence in that housing area. The officer suffered a broken eye socket, which also required 10 stitches to close that wound. This unprovoked attack left him scarred for life. I want to remind you all of my testimony in February. My testimony of an officer, January 11th. The officer was punched in the face twice while hitting the ground. While on the ground, he was kicked in the face. The officer's right eye was shut and closed with 2 open wounds, one to the top, one to the below, which required 17 stitches, and he obtained multiple facial fractures. 5 months later, the officer is still in pain, trying to cope with the physical, emotional, psychological trauma from this assault. This officer is scarred for life. 4 more female correctional officers have been sexually assaulted, which includes their vagina, breast, buttocks, growth. 53 in total. Correctional officers, women, had their bodies violated once again, but silence from you all once again. Where are the public special reports and the fact-finding on these incidents? Where are the follow-ups on your agendas? I stand by and will not waver from this very point. You all continue to display selective activism and lack the emotional intelligence to move this board forward, which is the basic requirement to provide proper and equal oversight. Collectively, as a board, your behavior, your demeanor, dysfunction, and disrespect that you all displayed in public toward one another at the May 16 BOC meeting proves my point that this board desperately needs oversight. You speak of transparency. Real transparency is the acknowledgement and a public plan of action to address all issues that affect correction officers, civilians, and medical staff working on Rikers Island, not just the inmates. As I toured the housing areas in each facility, I observed my fellow brothers and sisters making the ultimate sacrifice by ensuring the inmates are safe, ensuring institutional programs are afforded, coming to work and putting their best foot forward despite the challenging working conditions. They are physically exhausted, working 16 hours a day with no meal breaks, lack of time and energy spent with their families. There is no doubt in my mind, that real heroes, correction officers, work on Rikers Island. What I need for you to do is put our safety before politics. That's what's needed here. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Aubrey Aganaga, and I'm a legal fellow with the Prisoners' Rights Project at the Bronx Defenders. This board's role as an oversight body, shining light on what is happening inside the jails and creating opportunities for people to share their experiences and those of their loved ones, is absolutely critical to the preservation of any semblance of humanity in our city jails. We appreciate the board's revision of the agenda and bylaws to ensure arbitrary limits are not placed on the number of people testifying. Certainly, the voices of those impacted by the atrocities that continue to occur at the hands of the Department of Corrections should be uplifted, valued, and heard. In light of the most recent Nunez report, this could not be more true. The incidents described in the report are deeply troubling, but they are not novel, nor are they isolated events. People in custody, their loved ones, and their advocates have been sounding the alarm and reporting violent and deadly incidents like the ones described for years. We sincerely thank the monitoring team for their reporting and insistence for transparency and accountability, as DOC's audacity and egregiousness is at an all-time high. The department is incapable of accountability, and the consequence of that is deadly and lethal. This should shock the conscience of every single person in this room. On the topic of transparency and accountability, as well as deadly incidents, on April 6th, 2023, one of our clients in NYC states that the day began with excessive and unprovoked cell searches, resulting in permitted items such as sneakers being confiscated from people in their tier. In protest of this abuse in power and of the officer's refusal to provide any explanation, a fire was started in an individual cell. Smoke quickly filled the housing area, making it extremely difficult and hard to breathe. People were screaming for officers to respond. People were begging. After what seemed like ages, an officer finally appeared on the tier, but did little to nothing to address the now life-threatening situation. Our client shared that the people in their cells were frantically calling 311. They were frantically calling their families. They were frantically calling their lawyers. They called anyone who they thought might be able to help. Our director received one of those calls, and the sounds that she heard in the background were frightening. There was screaming, there was yelling, and there was begging for the cell doors to be opened. People were coughing and choking. In recounting this traumatic experience, Our client said repeatedly, "I thought we were all going to die." To date, our client continues to experience severe chest pain, difficulty breathing, and incessant coughing, which often results in spitting up blood. He is not receiving adequate medical care, primarily because he has to rely on DOC officers to access medical care. And shockingly, he has been returned to the same restrictive housing area, thus continuing him to exposure to harmful conditions that exacerbate all of his injuries. We wish that this was the only example we had to share with you all today. But the truth is, there are too many examples to choose from. However, we are inclined to expand on one more example, one that you were all aware of because the excruciating details of this horrific experience were outlined in the Monitor's most recent report. Our client suffered a lacerated spleen, broken ribs, and countless other long-lasting injuries that we are not at liberty to share at this time. He is currently at Bellevue Hospital being treated for a myriad of complications and a high fever, all of which are a direct consequence of the well-documented obstacles to accessing medical care, which he experienced as soon as he was returned to the West facility. Within hours of our client's return, his legal team was already having to engage in medical advocacy for him. He complained of poor pain management, of being ignored by officers and medical staff, and he complained of lackluster monitoring of his life-threatening injuries. It is unconscionable that this man, who spent 3 hours naked on the floor in obvious distress from life-threatening injuries, is still experiencing treatment devoid of dignity and regard for his life. And as a result, we cannot count on the department to keep our incarcerated community members safe. And it seems that the board's ability to properly and meaningfully engage in the oversight necessary to ensure the department is accountable continues to be jeopardized. As a final statement, the people of New York City deserve better, and Rikers Island must be closed.
Okay, thank you. I would like to remind the speakers, 3 minutes is the time allotted. We've given some latitude on that, but in the interest of time, because it is a long agenda, please stick to your 3 minutes if possible. Octavia, please. Yes, please.
Good morning. My name is Octavia Ewart, and I'm a legal advocate at the Prisoners' Rights Project at the Bronx Defenders. I'm giving this testimony on behalf of Sarah Knight, who is the Manager Director of Social Work at the Bronx Defenders. The set of programs currently provided on Rikers Island by nonprofits contracted with DOC serve as a lifeline to people during their incarceration. Participation in programs help people prepare to return to their communities by providing opportunities for reflection, connection, and future planning. I'm reminded of someone who proudly shared their certificate from a food handlers program offered recently and spoke about the specific job opportunities that certificates would enable them to apply for when they got home. I'm reminded of another person who was getting support from a program that voluntarily visited the island to ensure her housing would still be available to her upon her release date. Participation in programs also set people up for more positive outcomes in their legal cases. It gives them a chance to demonstrate to a judge or a prosecutor that they can and will participate in programming if offered, an alternative to incarceration. It increases opportunities to negotiate for and chances of receiving offers that minimize time in jail or prison. That's time away from family and their community, time exposed to traumas of carceral settings, and time of incarceration that costs far more than the programming we are asking to preserve. 2 weeks ago, A judge told one of our clients in court that she sees the efforts he's putting in reflected through the certificates he brings to each and every court appearance. Her praise was bittersweet for him. Just before the appearance, the client had shared with his defense team that he heard that the program would be cut. He was worried how the judge would be able to see him and how hard he's trying if there are no longer programs to participate in or certificates to be brought to court. Participation in programs also provides an opportunity for people to experience their humanity in an environment that strips them of it at every turn. We regularly hear stories from people we represent about lessons learned, support received, and glimmers of hope gained through classes, participation in groups, and by taking the incredibly huge and impressive steps to be vulnerable in front of their peers. And be vulnerable to outside community programmers. The connections to their humanity and to the humanity of their peers are crucial to people's survival and set foundations that outlast the periods of the program participation. This access is of even greater importance for incarcerated people with mental health conditions who are at greater risk while being incarcerated. If anything, these types of programs and support provided by external groups should be expanded, not eliminated. Support, resources, and acknowledgement of humanity of those who are incarcerated contribute to public safety, combat recidivism, and are unquestionably worth funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Brad? How do you pronounce your last name? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Brad Cawthon, and I'm the Director of Jail-Based Services at the Osborne Association. Osborne is a 90-year-old nonprofit organization dedicated to transforming the criminal justice system and supporting individuals, families, and communities affected by incarceration. Through a wide array of programs and advocacy, Osborne works to create opportunities for people to heal, grow, and thrive. We serve more than 10,000 individuals each year out of our offices in the Bronx, Harlem, Brooklyn, Newburgh, Buffalo, as well as through programs on Rikers and throughout prisons in New York State. I've been with Osborne for 10 years, working on Rikers Island and overseeing programs there the entire time. I've been in every jail overseen by DOC and have seen firsthand over many years the difference that programming makes. So I was shocked a few weeks ago when Mayor Adams and the New York City Department of Correction announced their plan to cut $17 million in funding for supportive programs on Rikers Island. The cuts would eliminate programs currently provided by Osborne, Fortune, Green Hope, SCO Family Services, FedCap, and the Hort. Together, we serve approximately 1,700 individuals daily across 179 housing areas. The cuts will particularly impact 18 mental health observation units for individuals with severe mental illness and 7 units for individuals in protective custody, increasing isolation and exacerbating already inhumane conditions. We are instrumental in reducing violence and recidivism, which is crucial to fostering safer communities. Our programs promote safety for those who work in our jails, as well as those who are held there. The cuts will also take away jobs from 90-plus staff who are now at risk of losing their jobs, all of whom chose to do this work and are passionate about it, and many of whom are formerly incarcerated themselves and decided to come back to Rikers to work with folks currently incarcerated. My written testimony includes information about alternative ways that DOC can meet the required PEG budget reduction. DOC's plan to assume responsibilities for these programs on July 1st, just 2.5 weeks from now, is simply not feasible. Our staff and those of the other providers are trained professionals, passionate about the work, and energized to connect with people and make a difference. They have been trained in multiple curricula and have years of experience working with individuals, groups, and in many instances were incarcerated themselves, so they can connect and build trust. This increases participation and yields meaningful results, which increases safety inside and outside. Outside program providers are also trusted in a way that even the best, most committed DO staff will not be. Having external providers is essential, always and especially in the moment where the population on Rikers is increasing, more people are staying there pre-trial longer than before, and when violence, death, and lack of transparency are a grave concern. On an average day, our staff defy the odds by gathering interesting material to discuss in each group. The participants are not mandated to attend any of our groups, so we gotta make sure that we have more to offer, something that's more interesting and compelling than what they may be watching on TV, listening to, or whatever game they may be playing on a tablet. In addition, there are many other distractions, all taking place in the middle of the day room where we're trying to conduct a group, including interpersonal dynamics that affect who decides to participate. It is an absolutely inappropriate setting to conduct group sessions, oftentimes asking people to share personal and sometimes traumatic experiences in an open setting. Okay, got you, thanks. Given these conditions, our staff do an amazing job at recruiting folks to attend our sessions on a regular basis. We have recommended to DOC for several years that we can improve attendance rates and the quality of our groups by simply changing the setting. Our impact is felt across the island from participants that we greet each day by giving them a different perspective on how to view the world, making better decisions from this point forward, regardless of the outcome of their case. We provide earned incentives such as court letters, enhanced recreation, hard skill classes, commissary items, outside meals that continue to give people hope that they are seen and they are cared about. We know from our interactions with officers and other jail staff that participants do respond to our presence. We will submit it. Thank you.
Antoinette Anderson. There's no Antoinette Anderson. Okay. There is L. Cumberbatch, I believe it is.
That's me, sir.
Okay.
Good afternoon to everybody. Today I would like to talk about two things. The rainbow that we're all expecting to come through the sky and just fix everything in 2027. We have to fix the Department of Corrections collectively. Sorry, just double check your microphone. We have to change the Department of Correction collectively, all of us. We are the thinking minds today. We're going to talk about this can that we're kicking down the road. All of us. All of us are wrong for kicking this can down the road. And inside that can is the New York City correction officer. The same guy that goes to the supermarket with you, that rides the bus with you, that skipped you online at the theater. That's the guy that was in this can. He's suffering. She's suffering. 18-hour shifts, no vacation days, no visible sight to the end of this crisis that we're going through, the staffing crisis that we're going through. A young lady just walked up here and told you about April 26th, the North Infirmary Complex that caught on fire. The correction officer was trying to secure this facility. Take a pair of sneakers from an inmate that were impermissible item. He decided, I'm gonna burn the entire tier down and everybody in it. What she didn't tell you is that the New York City correction officer saved everybody there, themselves and every incarcerated individual. She's absolutely right. Healthcare is at a minimum. Do you know why it's at a minimum? No staff. We can't get them from point A to point B because the correction officer is tired. They're sleepy. They've been working very hard for 3 years with no end in sight. Another man came here just a few minutes ago, like your suit, it was very nice. Talked about having a place where the program could take place, better than the day room. He's absolutely correct. Do you know why that place can't open? We're short of staff. Everybody here in New York City said, don't hire for the New York City Department of Corrections. You guys per capita have enough more than any other facility. But y'all don't understand and take into account we stand alone. We are the mark as far as incarceration is in the country. And our situation is more different than anybody else. We cannot continue to kick this can. That's inside this can is the correction officer. The correction officer, somebody that looks like me and you. Somebody that's just trying to live the American dream. Raise a family, put their kids through college, and it's unobtainable going forward. It's absolutely unobtainable. Could you imagine working 18 hours a day for 3 years? No vacation, no end in sight, nobody's telling you somebody's coming. There's no cavalry. These are the bravest people in New York City, hands down, bar none. I'll argue that with anybody in this room, anybody in the state of New York. Think about every decision going forward that it has to do with them. Security first. And I'm going to give y'all all a secret. I don't want y'all to tell anybody. Nothing's going to happen to the incarcerated individual with his growth while he's incarcerated unless he's safe. He is not going to leave the confines of his cell, of his dormitory, and go to no program if he's not safe. Who provides that safety? I don't hear no finger snaps. I don't hear any finger snaps. The New York City Department of Correction officer provides that safety for everything going forward. I really need y'all to understand that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Christopher Boyle. I'm the Director of Data Research and Policy of New York County Defender Services. As part of my position, I oversee, visit, and keep data on issues related to Rikers Island. My office represented Joshua Valles, which by now should be a case the entire board is familiar. News reports, seemingly with information provided by the Department of Corrections, indicate that the department released Joshua due to its power under compassionate release. I take issue with that characterization. Joshua was represented by Amanda Barfield, and her supervisor, Ernesto Papaleo, spent the better part of approximately 3 to 4 days jumping through ridiculous hoops to get Joshua released. Joshua eventually released had nothing to do with compassionate on the part of the Department of Corrections. It's a direct result of tireless legal advocacy by our lawyers and actions by the court. The Board of Corrections should create minimum standards related to compassionate relief so that no other family has to suffer the way Joshua was made to suffer this last month. The way Joshua's family was treated by the Department of Corrections was unconscionable. On Saturday, May 20th, our office received word that Joshua was in the ICU and his prognosis wasn't good. On Monday, May 22nd, we learned that Joshua was still not alert. On Tuesday, May 23rd, we contacted the assigned district attorney and emailed the limited information we had from Joshua's doctors. The assigned assistant stated that they would speak to their supervisor. Later that afternoon, the assigned assistant suggested that we attempt to get the case advanced and added to the court calendar. The case was calendared on Wednesday, May 24th, in front of a different judge than who was initially overseeing the case, and Joshua had a cut slip issued at 10:48 that day. As I'm sure you all know, when a client like Joshua is transported to a hospital because he's seriously ill or he's injured, he's still technically in the custody of the Department of Corrections. This could mean that he or she is handcuffed to the hospital bed and that there are officers from the department assigned to guard the hospital room. Family members are unable to see their loved ones in these circumstances. The supervisor, Mr. Papaleo, had to place calls to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. He had to pass along CHS records. He had to coordinate with the court and the clerk's office to be able to add Joshua's case to the court calendar to request at the court to issue a cut slip to have Joshua released. At no time did we receive a phone call from the commissioner telling us, hey, don't worry about this. We've already released Joshua. Far from there being a compassionate release hotline, there can be called that when we need or have to have a client released for these circumstances. That doesn't exist. This was the Department of Corrections looking to get Joshua off their books so they didn't have to have another death before the federal monitor report that just came out recently. Another awful, needless death of a person on Rikers Island. Another attempt to cover up what exactly happened to Joshua, which is still very much an unknown. I would welcome a formal written policy for getting clients released when they are terminally ill or have been admitted to local hospitals with life-threatening injuries. However, as far as I can tell, there are none. I think it was a travesty that the department was able to allege a narrative to the press that they had any hand in releasing Joshua when it took our attorneys many days to accomplish that goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Eileen, Mayor?
Good afternoon. My name is Eileen Marr. I'm a civil rights union leader from Bocal, New York, a social worker, and a survivor of 420 plus days on Rikers Island. So I'm well aware of the hell on earth that defines Rikers and all of the New York City DOC facilities. People are dying, detainees. Wait, no, strike that. People, human beings, keep dying on Rikers. And the individuals charged with the care and custody of these 22 plus heartbeats, the Department of Correction, and the Board of Corrections do not care. There is no death penalty in New York State officially. Unofficially, yes, there is. And unlike an official death sentence, where the accused is tried and usually retried in numerous legal forums, the individuals who are murdered and maimed, usually without ever having their day in court, and most definitely without a legal conviction. Not only do you condone the officer on detainee murder, violence, and rape, the DOC and the BOC have doubled down by defying the now 3-year-old halt solitary law enacted in New York, by continuing to utilize the practice and adding the additional medieval torture slave practice of shackling detainees to a wooden chair for not hours, but days. Detainees continue to be sexually violated and raped on a daily, if not hourly basis, not at the hands of other detainees, but by correction officers. A week ago, I received an email from a 20-year-old man. He had recently been released on bail from the island. While he was there, recently in 2023, he had been placed in the Bing, solitary. Not because he had violated a rule or committed an alleged infraction. He had not. It was for the express purpose so a captain could repeatedly, anally rape him, not only with his penis, but with a broken broomstick handle. The young man reached out to me specifically, not only because of my activism work in this corrupted world, but because 26 years ago, one of my dearest friends experienced the same exact trauma and torture on the island, and it became the main catalyst in my friend's death years later. The young man who recently contacted me said to me, "I don't want to die like your Michael did." When I asked him if he tried to file an official complaint, the young man said, "I did," but they said, "You're gay, isn't that your thing?" I dropped my phone upon reading that text because it mirrored exactly what my friend was told 26 years ago when he tried to seek justice. I tell you this because nothing on that godforsaken landfill has changed. Not in 1997, 2014 or 2023, which is when this young man was detained. DOC cannot and has never been able to do their job. And you, the BOC, are co-signing that perpetual climate of murder, rape, and abuse at the hands of DOC by not holding them accountable, but by doubling down on the human rights and legal violations, allowing them to hide camera recordings and withhold deaths, the loss of a human life from not only the press, but the loved ones of that detainees. It's sickening. The show's over. It needs to be removed from all and any of your hands so lives will not continue to be lost. Thank you.
Thank you. Leah Dunbar.
Good afternoon, Chair and board members. I'm Leah Dunbar, a paralegal at Children's Rights, a national advocate for youth in state systems. We are a member of the Jails Action Coalition and advocate on behalf of young adults on Rikers. At the May 16th Board of Correction hearing, we were planning to ask why the April 3rd and April 24th Nunez monitoring reports were not on the agenda. They describe a long pattern of questionable promotion decisions reflective of the department's long-standing culture of mismanagement, a continued cause for alarm at the persistently high rates of use of force and interpersonal violence, deficiencies in managing intake, and ESU's mismanagement of serious incidents regularly leading to use of force. For this meeting, we ask why the findings of the June 8th Monitor report are not on the agenda. They are universally damning regarding the department's attempts to prevent the Monitor from reporting on life-altering incidents and deaths and an overall lack of transparency and accountability. As we know, the Monitor found that the current state of affairs in the jails remains alarming, not just for the rampant violence and frequency with which force is used, but also because of regression in the department's management. How many more such reports must the Monitor publish before we all work together to close Rikers as soon as possible in accordance with the law? We commend the board for calling attention to the department's move to cut contracted providers like Fortune and Osborne and having untrained DOC staff supposedly provide programming. This is a huge loss for incarcerated persons. For example, the Fortune Society served more than 2,000 people last year on Rikers and the Boat and worked on 1,500 discharge plans for incarcerated people re-entering their communities. There are other issues deserving of the board's attention. For example, the administration slow-walking the Brooklyn Borough-based jail, DOC's new enhanced supervision housing directive that violates the board's RMAS rules, the proposed city budget that could focus on crucial community investments to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, instead of funding COBA's vacant positions, not to mention staff who don't show up for work, and the April 6th fire at North Infirmary Command. Finally, we urge the board to join us in advocating for decarceration, especially given the bill recently passed by the City Council. As we all well know, jails and prisons feed the cycle of crime, they don't prevent it. Incarceration makes people more likely to commit crimes when they get out, not less likely. Putting people away simply does not improve public safety. Our young adults, all incarcerated persons, and the city taxpayers deserve a more meaningful allocation of the $557,000 per year that it costs to keep someone in DOC's custody. Thank you for focusing on the disaster that is Rikers.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment section. We will now turn to DOC for updates on recruitment and training.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Board of Corrections, the public, members of DOC. Thank you for having us here today to talk about the direction that DOC is headed as a result of the new training program that we've implemented as a result of my arrival. My name is Dr. Robert Gonzalez. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Training and Development. To my left behind me is my Director of Training, Alan Stryker. If the board will allow me to just present my PowerPoint, and then we can answer a few questions at the end if everybody's okay with that. It's my understanding that you were provided with the PowerPoint, and I think the PowerPoint will also be displayed for those who are watching remotely. So allow me to put on my academic hat for a moment, if everyone would.
Just for point of clarification, there is no remote transmission today.
Oh, there is not, okay. I apologize. I understand some people are watching on YouTube, so I wasn't sure how they were viewing anything, but okay. Fair enough. If we can show the PowerPoint. Thank you. As I mentioned, under Commissioner Molina's leadership, 10 months into his tenure, I was brought in to begin a culture change here at the Department of Corrections relative to implementing training, specifically in the area of just a realignment and just a new focus on how we wanted to move training forward here at the Department of Correction. It took a little time for me to get hired based on his appointment in January, but when I arrived, I hit the ground running. And one of the things the commissioner wanted me to do was to document the direction that we were going in relative to training, and also to institute a new program relative to recruitment on the uniform side. So those are going to be the two areas that I'm going to be talking about. One of the things that I identified as a result of my arrival at DOC was that many of the courses were taught based on a calendar. So what they would do is they would identify a need, they would pull out a calendar, and they would put names of guest speakers. But there wasn't really any archivable information that was being retained relative to those courses. So my first objective was to design a program where we could create lesson plans versus PowerPoints. And anyone in academia knows that there is a difference between a lesson plan and a PowerPoint, right? So my objective was to create lesson plans for every course that we roll out here at DOC. So that was my first plan. If we can go to the PowerPoint. Just a little bit about me. I have a doctorate degree from St. John's University. I accomplished that credential while I was a police officer in New York City Police Department with nearly 23 years of law enforcement experience. In addition to being the assistant commissioner of the NYPD prior to my retirement, I was also the chief of training and policy for the New York State Attorney General's office, and ultimately combined to have 3 decades of law enforcement experience, specifically in the area of patrol, investigations, and at the tail end in training. In addition to that, while being a police officer, I also taught at various colleges and universities here in New York City, John Jay, NYIT, Monroe College, Hostos, in addition to being the Dean of Criminal Justice and Security at the University of Phoenix. So all of that combined with 3 decades of law enforcement experience and 2 decades of academic experience qualified me to come in and look at the training program at DOC and ultimately implement a new strategy moving forward. Many of the objectives or the goal in looking at the program at DOC was to provide a more robust learning experience. If anybody can remember, maybe you've taken courses and you had a professor who pretty much stood up there and all they did was click, 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 right? In academia, we call that death by PowerPoint, right? So what we've implemented since my arrival is we've implemented a practice where we actually use Gen-Tech video to analyze behaviors. We actually do case studies, we do discussions, we do group exercises. So much that at the completion of the first course that I ever implemented at DOC, a couple of the attendees, the students actually approached me and said, wow, this is the first time we've ever did any interactive learning here. Everything is policy, press button, but nobody actually tests us to see if we actually, learn the information, right? So we're moving forward in a whole new direction where we're implementing that kind of practice in every course that we teach. So not only do we have our police academy instructors, but we also have representatives from the investigations division teaching courses for us now. We have representatives from trials who are now getting certified as instructors. We recently had the general counsel also appear on a video for us, and as it relates to a new ESU course that we're actually rolling out on use of force. So we're getting everyone actively involved and bringing those content experts into what we are now doing in the training and development vision so that they can have a real contribution and bring real content experts into everything that we're doing. In addition to that, we're utilizing surveys. I was recently at a city council hearing and one of the council members asked, how do you assess and evaluate the experiences of those members of the agency? Well, I do it through using SurveyMonkey, which is an application that we use online. We send it to our students, we send it to our supervisors, our managers, our executive leaders, so that we can have real contributions from an anonymous perspective on how we can redevelop training in DOC. So we've been using surveys. We've also developed a social media platform to get information out there. There was always a reluctance to allow certain units in public safety the ability to utilize social media. So upon my arrival, I wanted to lead kind of a different mentality where we want to promote the success, the accomplishments, and some of the great things that are happening in the agency through the use of social media. We recently identified a new Deputy Commissioner of Public Information who's also very supportive of social media. So again, we're moving in the right direction as it relates to sharing information, but from a training perspective, we continue to utilize social media to our advantage to get information out there, right? So that's another thing we're doing. When I first arrived, Commissioner Molina, after about the 60th day, says, you're doing some great things. We need to memorialize this. We need to package it. We need to present it to the Federal Monitor. We need to present it to BOC. So what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to kind of package your first 100 days. I want to get a sense of what you've been able to accomplish within the first 100 days to show the direction that the DOC is moving in as a result of your appointment. So between December 5th in 2022 through March 15th, 2023, which was the first 100 days, we broke it down into personnel, projects, and future initiatives. So we look at personnel. One of the first things we did is we identified an Assistant Commissioner of Training Development, Dr. Jeremiah Johnson, who has 2 decades of law enforcement experience in addition to a PhD from John Jay College, has turned everything that I've given him into gold. He's a huge, huge asset to the department, and he has a research background, he has publications. He's been helping to kind of drive this new culture in training at DOC. In addition, when I first arrived, we looked at, like most people would do, once you take over a new bureau, a new division, is establish a new organizational chart. So we identified different key components of the training development division that needed to kind of be realigned. One of them was establishing this organizational chart. One of the individuals identified in the organizational chart is my Director of Training, Alan Stryker, who oversees our budget, who oversees planning for new trainings, and oversees our curriculum. So again, if you look at the chart that I gave you, or you'll see the organizational chart, and I identified certain units that needed to be created. What wasn't there prior to my arrival was a curriculum evaluation team. So there wasn't a real mechanism for evaluating curriculum and even archiving it. So if you wanted to look back at courses that were taught at DOC 5 years ago, you'd have a hard time trying to locate that curriculum. So we've created a mechanism and a whole assessment evaluation in identifying curriculum. We also hired a company called SkillSource, which has now helped us to write and organize our curriculum. So we're working very closely with SkillSource. We have a contract with them relative to our curriculum going forward. We also identified the ADW ranks, 3 key positions that we needed to assign individuals. The first one was recruit training. So we actually appointed ADW Carter to oversee our recruitment recruits in the academy. We also, our gun range, we have ADW Russo, who's now overseeing our gun range to give more importance to the range and the cycles where our officers qualifying with their firearms. And we also established a new recruitment unit, which I'll get into later on in my PowerPoint. As you know from the slides, it's at the tail end. I'll get a little more important about recruitment, but we also appointed Captain Hines to oversee our recruitment unit. So within those first 100 days, if you look at the next slide, we get to projects. One of the most notable things that we did, and the first project that I was asked to assist with, was to give our recruit officers a better learning experience. And we did that by partnering up with the NYPD, and we just graduated last month our first recruit class from the NYPD's state-of-the-art police academy. If anybody has been to this academy, it cost over $1 billion. It was actually built in 2008, between 2014. It's a palace. I encourage everybody on the board to actually go and check this place out. It's really nice. They have a bodega. They have a train station so we can do scenario-based training. They have apartments for domestic disputes. They have 2 precincts, cells, jails. So recently, upon my arrival, the first project I was tasked with by Commissioner Molina was to bring that experience to correction officers. And we successfully brought our first class in February 23rd, and we actually graduated them just a few weeks ago at the NYPD Academy. That same academy class now is now part of a field training program for 8 weeks, but I'll get a little more into that as I go on through my testimony. We also created a scholarship unit. We now have a scholarship unit. We just cut the ribbon a few weeks ago where we have one centralized location now in the agency where members of the agency can actually go and get information on professional development, on college programs, on scholarships, anything related to personal development. Upon my arrival, I felt like there was a gap. There wasn't really a lot of personal investment, not just from the agency, but the individuals relative to their own futures. I'm the poster child, as far as taking advantage of scholarships and opportunities through the NYPD, through finishing my bachelor's, my master's, and my doctorate, all while being a uniformed police officer. So I want to bring those same opportunities to DOC. And the line is buzzing. We have a whole intake process now, a phone number that people are calling in, trying to get information to see what's available. As you know, and as you heard, we have relaxed the college requirement, temporarily, through the hiring process, but that does not mean we're not indebted and invested in trying to professionalize our officers. We're still very much engaged in that process and have been engaging with quite a few colleges and universities in the 5 boroughs and beyond to bring really, really professional development opportunities to members of DOC. So that's another thing we did. We recently, again, rolled out yesterday. We partnered up with Vertex, which is a program where we're implementing what's called KSAC, which is the state certification of 350 officers. Some of you are shaking your head. Perhaps you're familiar with this. We're actually bringing that to DOC. We just launched a course on Monday, yesterday. 25 officers were taken out of facilities. They're going to go through the first phase of that certification that now certifies our police officers on alcohol and drug abuse. And these are correctional officers that are in the facilities. So we're talking about boots on the ground people that can actually go and engage individuals who they think may be in crisis, who are in our facilities. So that's a huge step forward for us. We just rolled it out yesterday. It's a 2-week course. It's gonna be a 350-hour program that we're investing in just a small group of people as a pilot to try to educate our police officers based on alcohol and substance abuse. We've also began a rebranding initiative since my arrival. New patches, new logos, new websites, new social media, all of that to kind of give the training development division kind of like a new momentum. We feel the only way to change the culture at DOC is through effective training, through adequate training. And we've done that through a whole rebranding. We've also implemented a newsletter, which you can see on the screen there, where monthly the Academy puts out a newsletter about its staff. We have about 100 staff altogether. Training, 0.01% of the agency is training 99% of the agency. So we have a small cadre of instructors who are experts in the field, the best in the business, doing training. And we memorialize that through our newsletter to kind of highlight some of those things that they're doing. At the Academy, birthdays, weddings, childbirths, anything relative to kind of improving the morale, in the Academy, because we think that'll relay out into the facilities as well. Next slide, future initiatives. We are promoting 6 ADWs. I know it says 5, but I just found out yesterday from the commissioner that it's going to be 6. So we're actually promoting 6 ADWs next week. Again, trying to increase our head count relative to our middle managers. So that's going to roll out on Monday, on June 19th. We also are rolling out tomorrow an ESU in-service 2-day course that's going to focus on, again, not just being taught by Academy instructors or ESU instructors, but also taught by instructors from investigations division, also from trials. So we're going to be educating our ESU officers on use of force, on proper tactics. We're also implementing a new module called intervention training, where if you see an officer who appears to be using excessive force, you should intervene and terminate that force, because you may be held just as liable as that officer that's using that excessive force. So that's a whole new module that we added into this course. And this two-day ESU course is as a result of a request from the Federal Monitor. So we're adhering to a request from the Federal Monitor to retrain our ESU through an in-service course, and also our SRT officers, our special response teams in all the facilities. All total, we're looking at about nearly 100 officers combined. We're starting that training tomorrow. We should be done by June 30th. We intend on having a quarterly in-service course with ESU and SRT to give them these important items that we feel need to be kind of, rehearsed in the classroom, and also, through scenario-based exercises as well. So we're doing that as well. As you know, we're breaking ground, hopefully this year, on a new police academy in the same vicinity of the NYPD facility, $250 million state-of-the-art training facility. It's my understanding it's gonna be 4 levels. The first level is gonna be a jail for scenario-based training, and also a medical facility, in addition to classroom space, administrative space, and then also a lecture hall. So it's a $250 million facility. We're supposed to be breaking ground this year. Hopefully we'll end construction by 2025, and that'll give us the ability to really, really train our officers. I hope to see that through I was the commissioner who turned the key to moving the NYPD facility in 2014, and I'm hoping I can be the commissioner to turn the key in 2025 as well. So we're very excited about that as well. A redesign of the recruit officer training program. Prior to my arrival, the training curriculum was 24 weeks. It was 24 weeks of in-class and education instruction in the MassBath Academy, the Corrections Academy. I invite anyone who wants to come, on the board to maybe do a visit of that facility and also the NYPD facility, so you can get a real sense of what we're looking to do and the contribution we're making to development. But prior to my arrival, the academy was 24 weeks. We actually realigned it and brought it down to 12 weeks of in-class instruction in addition to an 8-week field training program. And the benefit to the field training program that we have now is since that class has started 4 weeks ago after graduating the academy, we have not lost a single correctional officer to a resignation. So the support that our rookies are getting in the facilities by mentoring officers is helping them to stay on the job longer. So we're very proud of that program. We're giving them real support, real guidance. We're shuffling them around to different experiences, from the housing units to intake, to clothing, to recreation, to distribution of food. So our rookies are really, really enjoying that experience. In addition to the field training officers, they're veteran correction officers that we've identified, that we've done background checks on to see that they would make good mentors. And so far, the program has been working very well, actually. Not a single resignation. And in the history of the agency, we usually lose a lot of rookies right after the academy. Once they get in the facilities, they feel unsupported. They're in an unfamiliar environment. They're in the facilities. Oftentimes, we lose them. So going forward, we're doing pretty well with our field training program. Let me see what slide we're on now. I just want to make sure I'm in the right spot. We just recently re-signed another MOU with the NYPD Academy that's going to take us into 2024 and also into 2025 if we request it, so that we could train our recruits in that particular facility. Like I said, the goal was to train our officers quicker, but in a better facility, while at the same time getting them in the facilities quicker so that they get hands-on instruction from a veteran correction officer. As you know, we're dealing with a tremendous attrition issue. We're scheduling a class for July. We'll have another maybe 200 correction officers in July, and then again in October. So by the end of the fiscal year, we hope to have another calendar year, another 300 to 400 officers now trained and in our facilities. Because as you know, with attrition, with retirements coming up, we have in 2004, 2005, we're expecting a huge exodus, because that's going to be the 20-year mark for big classes from 2004 and 2005. So we're aggressively working with the NYPD so that we could train more quicker, get them in the facilities quicker, but also a better experience. As I mentioned, less death by PowerPoint, more interaction, more engagement. Next slide. Okay. We also developed, as I mentioned, an 8-week field training program. Those field training officers underwent a 63-hour, 10-day course so that we could train our veteran correction officers on how to do observation reports, on tactics, on supervision, on leadership, on ethics, so that they'd be in a position to now mentor our rookies out of the academy, right? So we also invested in our field training officers as well and did a pretty comprehensive field training program. New York State only requires 40 hours to be a field training officer, but our program was 63 hours. So we exceeded the amount that was required by DCJS. Next slide. Another accomplishment that we actually had was we actually promoted 26 officers to captains. It was my understanding that we had not had a captain's promotion since 2018. As you know, captains being first-line supervisors, probably one of the most important ranks within the agency. So we've invested in that, we've promoted them. But in addition to that, we've also realigned the curriculum relative to also the captains. When I got there, I believe the captain's course, you can go to the next slide. I believe the captain's course at that time was 12 weeks, but we shaved it down to 5 weeks in addition to having a field training program. But one of the things we did is we put together a really, really good booklet that we gave each captain that talk about those roles, responsibilities, information. If you look at the slide, it starts off with all the pieces, integrity, all those different comments up there, passionate, and it's all in pieces, right? But at the end of the course, we put all those pieces together and we created the captain's shield, right? So collectively, we took all those characteristics that we thought would make a good captain, and we put them together, and ultimately after 5 weeks, right, then send them out to field training. Some of the other ongoing projects, we have a lead training program for our directors, our non-uniform staff. It's a 16-week program. Once a week, our directors, in partnership with Dale Carnegie and John Jay College, actually host a lead training program for our directors. We also do our advanced ACCM, Advanced Certificate in Corrections Management. It's a partnership with John Jay to offer graduate courses up to 15 to members of our agency, which also could take them into a master's program in corrections. We also have our SEEDS program as well. Currently, we have 11 SEEDS. We're looking right now, based on budget, to hire 75 in September, and a third of our graduates usually end up entering the corrections department. So this is, again, a Trojan horse into getting into the corrections department. We also just recently had 19 of our instructors complete an EMT training program to certify them as EMTs. They're in the process now of filing for the state exam so that they can be EMTs. So we're making an investment relative to our instructors so that they can also be good in first aid and things of that nature. All right, so they're almost done. And we're at 81% as it relates to Narcan training and also suicide. We do suicide training as well, agency-wide. Our suicide training is also close to 80%. Upon my arrival, we were somewhere around 40%, but we've made Narcan and suicide prevention training just a priority in the agency. As people are coming back, long-term sick from injuries, line of duty injuries, we're bringing them back, we're certifying, we're putting them in facilities. So we made great progress on Narcan and suicide prevention. Now getting into our recruitment strategy. Upon my arrival, I was asked to kind of come up with you can go to the next one. I was asked to develop a recruitment strategy for the agency on the uniform side. As I mentioned, right now, based on convergence reports, we're expecting that probably by 2025, if we don't recoup some of the personnel that we've lost, we could be somewhere around 50% less personnel than we were prior to COVID. So there's been a huge, huge push to recruit. We established a recruitment unit with very different demographics, sexual orientations, so we can go to different types of events in our communities and really go out there and recruit, for this very difficult but yet bold position with DOC. Next slide, please. Again, this photo here shows the diversity of the recruitment unit in various events that we've been at. Currently, there's one captain overseeing the unit and 8 officers who have gone around the city. In the slide after this one, it talks about what those locations were. Since establishing this unit in February, we've been to over 100 locations within just a few months. So we're going to 2 or 3 locations a day. We split the team up. We go to all kinds of events. This particular slide here talks about a GPS tracking program. So we've taken pin mapping to a whole nother level as it relates to recruitment. If you look at this particular map, it shows the locations that we've done recruitment in red. It shows where the respondents live, those who are coming to take our exams and fill out applications. And then the yellow is where retirees actually reside. So we've been using this map to kind of strategically and laser focused on where we want to appoint our recruitment staff so that they can go out to specific locations and venues so that we can get a good response. And it's my understanding on the exam that we just closed out in July, we had over 1,000 applicants, which is higher than most exams we've had over the last few years. So it seems to be that the recruitment strategy is trending in the right direction. We've actually implemented a $68 fee in order to take the exam, where prior to this one, it was free. And what was happening is 80% of the people that filled out applications weren't showing up to take the exam. So now that we put a cost to it, $68, people have a real investment and they're actually showing up to take the exam. So we think that's moving us in the right direction. But this is an old strategy of using pin maps where we actually now use GPS tracking to get a real sense of what type of progress we're making relative to recruitment and what those locations are. Next slide. Again, just more photos. Oh, sorry, these are a list of all the locations that we've been at. Just to name a few, we've had over 100, since February. So we're moving, we're hitting the ground, we're being, everywhere I think we need to be. We've taken recommendations from BOC on some of these locations where BOC has felt that we may be beneficial if we recruit at those locations. But I think we're moving in the right direction as it relates to recruitment. But I do want to say that it's challenging. This is a challenging time to recruit. There's a lot of negative publicity about DOC. So a lot of times my recruiters will report back saying that they've been to locations and individuals has come to the table and they've been able to even cite, some of the issues that are happening in the jails, based on information that's being shared with the media. So we've had a very, very challenging time with recruitment because of just the negative publicity that we tend to get. But it's still considered a very honorable position, a very noble position, and probably one of the most dangerous positions in New York City relative to public safety. And like I says, I wage, I'll wager on our staff versus anybody's as being the boldest in New York City. And that pretty much concludes my presentation. All right?
Well,
thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
1 second, please. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
Deputy Commissioner. Are there questions for the department? Board member?
Hi. This was fantastic. And I love how you're using data and maps for recruitment. Are you trying to target neighborhoods where there's a lot of people who finish up in corrections in terms of recruitment?
What was that part?
Like, are you trying to recruit from those neighborhoods that are most impacted by the Department of Correction?
Oh, absolutely, and thank you for your question. Yeah, we strategically, we speak to the clergy, we speak to school officials, we speak to political officials. We attend quite a few in the neighborhoods, and we haven't turned down a single invite yet. So anybody that invites us, we'll take that approach, but we also strategically look at our GPS, we see where people are residing that are registered for these exams, and we hit them twice as hard.
But my question is more like, if you look at the map and understand that there's more folks in Rikers from Upper Manhattan and the South Bronx.
Yeah.
Can you do recruitment in those neighborhoods?
Oh, absolutely. And if you see, most of our locations are in those neighborhoods where the inmate, the person in custody population reflects, those locations around the city. We're heavy up in Manhattan North. We're heavy in the Bronx. We're heavy in Harlem. We attend all of those areas where it reflects those that are in custody.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. You mentioned that you haven't lost someone yet who just went through the training program. That's an amazing accomplishment.
Thank you.
If there was a rookie who got into the jails and didn't actually feel comfortable yet, is there a way for that person to have more training before they're brought out? And second to that is, if they have a relationship with their mentor that's not working out, is there a way to reassign them?
We do actually. We actually have our Deputy Commissioner of Administration here, Ron Edwards, who actually sits and talks to every individual that wants to actually resign. And he talks to them. He asks them, is it your facility? Is it the hours? Is it supervision? What are the real reasons why you're looking to resign? And is there something we can do to prevent that from happening? And he's been successful. I mean, he really sits them down and puts a lot of time into it. I've been there a couple of times to watch his spiel, and it's actually pretty good, and he's been successful. So yeah, we do have a whole retention strategy to keep those people still in the agency.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're going to go to Board Member Sherman and then Board Member Cohen.
Thank you very much for your presentation. At the top of your presentation, you talked about using surveys to gather information. I'm interested in hearing what you've learned so far, who's analyzing the feedback, and how is it being used to drive practice moving forward?
We use an anonymous survey through SurveyMonkey, if you're familiar with that particular instrument. It allows an individual to actually respond and not be identified. We've targeted all different types of populations, from entry-level police officers, correctional officers just graduated, to those coming in, to our captains, our ADWs, our wardens, and we send them specific questions, asking them, what can we do better? How can we change training? What are we missing? So it gives them an opportunity to respond anonymously, and I read every one. So I take whatever information I think is valid and I import it with my curriculum team, and we see how we can make changes when it makes sense. But there is no level in the agency that has not been subjected to some level of survey. We also do in-person interviews. We just had a luncheon for the last academy class that had graduated. We sat them down and we asked them, what can we do in the academy better? Cost us little money, we treated them to lunch, but we actually got to sit down and talk to them, and they told us where they felt we should make some improvements. And that's exactly what we do. We're not above editing, we're not above pivoting, and we're not above making changes if necessary.
Board Member Cohen.
Thank you so much. A lot of people along with it, and it should.
Thank you.
I had many questions, and as I have them written down, you answered them.
Sure.
I have one sort of general question.
Sure.
department decided you didn't need healthcare. I didn't give an exact reason for it, but I assume it was to increase people with the ability to apply. I didn't know if it was a good idea or not. We're describing many of the training programs. Quality of them is extraordinary.
Dr. Cohen, Dr. Cohen, I apologize to interrupt, but could you please turn your mic on so that it's recorded?
Were you able to hear me?
I do.
So basically, demonstrate some, show me that it works, even though you're cutting some stuff, but somehow the quality of your training makes up for it.
Okay. Well, we have not relaxed, again, the applicant processing background checks, which we will continue to do. So what we have found is over the last few years, going back to 2018, that there were about 3,000 individuals who didn't have the college but were still interested in being hired. So what we did is we reevaluated the job standards and realized that you really didn't need college to be an entry-level correction officer, and that would increase our headcount and ultimately our candidate pool. So it was a business decision. But we are in no way, shape, or form trying to reduce the professionalism that's associated with the position of correction officer. And we're doing that by creating scholarship opportunities, again, having professional development courses, bringing in consultants to do courses on leadership. Tomorrow, we're starting a 3-day leadership course for our ADWs and our deputy wardens so that we can, again, invest in them. If we invest in them, we feel that we'll get a better result, and we've been doing that.
Endorse the main point you made here, which is that college is very important, but many people have not had the chance to go to college, and they should not be cut out of jobs for which they're qualified to do. So I think I commend you for the department for doing that.
Thank you, sir.
If there's no other questions from board members, Board Member Hoskins.
Thank you for that presentation. I'm asking some questions for clarification.
Sure.
So all training within the Department of Corrections comes through your unit?
Yes.
So I'm asking this question because I'm struggling that I see nothing on there around program to train correctional officers in the ability to deliver evidence-based programming.
Gotcha.
When we know $17 million of programming is getting ready to be cut, and our commissioner is saying that correctional staff is going to deliver it.
Sure.
So as the lead of that department, can you tell me how programming training is going to be delivered and implemented and how much of it has already begun?
Gotcha. Well, we've already been giving skills to our officers on how to deal with de-escalation, critical incidences, conflict resolution. So those skills that we put in our curriculum are just basic to being a correction officer. But what you're talking about is specific programs by specific companies. Again, like I mentioned, we are working with Vertex now so that we can get our officers trained on alcohol and substance abuse identification. So we're taking on that responsibility. It's a large responsibility, but it is one that we are taking, and we are including the results of that course in our curriculum.
Thank you for that. You said something very important. You said identification.
Yeah.
There's a difference in identifying a person with a substance abuse or a mental health and delivering treatment as an intervention to that, which we know is what prepares individuals.
Right. Well, so I'm not here to say that our officers are clinicians in any shape or form.
Thank you.
They're first responders to identify and ultimately, request their appropriate assistance.
And refer
That's how
to a program
Absolutely.
service provider. Thank you.
If you don't mind, I do have a question.
Sure, absolutely.
The question is around, I guess, doing more with less.
Okay.
You went from 24 weeks to, 12 weeks?
Yes, sir.
You went from 11 to 5?
Yes.
What is the net gain and the reduction, and what is your review of doing more with less?
Well, with the recruits at the entry level, as I mentioned, we went from 24 weeks to 12 weeks in class instruction while adding an 8-week field training program. So realistically, we went from 24 weeks to 20 weeks because the facilities, the on-hands instruction, the actual tactics is so valuable that you would get that in person in the facilities. So what we did is we just realigned the training, but we didn't actually take anything away. We didn't lose our college credits. And I want to make it very clear that the Department of Criminal Justice Services, DCJS, requires 6 weeks of training to be a peace officer, correction officer. 6 weeks. We give 20 weeks. So we're nearly 4 times more than what's required on the state level. So I just want to make it very clear that the realignment didn't take anything away. We just strategically repackaged it into a hands-on field training program under the guidance of a veteran field training officer, rather than have them sit in a classroom for 24 weeks. I felt that wasn't effective, and I felt we weren't getting the best bang for our buck, while at the same time getting them in the facilities to learn inside the facilities. That was the priority. Same thing with the captains. We reduced the size of the captain's course from 11 weeks to 5 weeks, but then we added 2 weeks in the facilities. Once again, to give them real experience inside the facilities, and their experience is being evaluated. They're being observed, they're being evaluated. We're providing checkoffs on what we want them to experience. So we're not just throwing them in there and turning our backs. I'm very much involved. I still have an ADW that speaks to the jail wardens daily about the effectiveness of the field training program. And we've been able to pivot. And like I said, collectively, this has been the first time in the history of the agency that 4 weeks after graduation, we've not lost a single correction officer. And it's because we've come up with a mechanism of providing them support while they get their sea legs so that they can actually do the job of correction officer. You're welcome, sir. All right, thank you. Thanks, sir.
We will now entertain CHS variance requests. So
Hi.
we will now consider 2 variance requests from CHS. CHS was requesting renewal of longstanding variances regarding psychotropic medication and tuberculosis screening. The request for tuberculosis screening is for a continuing variance. The request regarding psychotherapy medication is for a 1-year limited variance. I will ask CHS to present these requests.
Hi, I'm Lauren Stossel. I'm the Chief of Service for Mental Health. So CHS is requesting a variance for the psychotropic medication request that was first granted by the board in November of 2005. This is a variance that authorizes psychiatrists to see and evaluate stable patients in the general population up to 28 days rather than 14 days, and we're requesting the variance for 1 year.
Thank you. Zach Rosner from CHS Medicine. We are also requesting a tuberculosis screening variance related to the use of quantiferon gamma, so a blood test to screen for latent tuberculosis, which is a commonly accepted blood test in the community, has become the standard of care. This variance was first requested in 2013, and we're requesting for the QFT test to be included with tuberculin skin test as one of the screening mechanisms for TB.
Okay, we're supposed to go to public comment. There's no signups for public comments, but if there are 1 or 2 public comments, we will accept those at this time. There being none, we now turn to a vote on the psychotropic medication 1-year limited variance. I'll ask for a board member to move to vote on the requested variance. Should I ask, do the board members need a few moments to?
I'd like to have a discussion on.
Okay. All right, so we'll go to discussion. Dr. Cohen, you.
They're legitimate, they're state of the art and state of practice, but I think other board members do not feel comfortable giving a continuous year-long variance and would would prefer that we give you the 3 or 6 month variance that we traditionally give. I don't think that it'll make you come up here, twice as often, but other than that, I think it will not impair your practice. So, do you have a problem with that, or?
No, I think we're fine to amend the request to be a 6-month renewal.
Thank you.
Well, I can say, Dr. Cohen is very generous because I really did not have knowledge in this area, and I asked staff to research it further and perhaps to retain a psychiatrist so that we can get independent review. I know we do have doctors on the board, but we do not have psychiatrists, I don't believe, on the board that can determine some of the effects of a long-term continuous variance on the matter. That being said, I would accept a motion from the board regarding the psychotropic medication.
So move.
Well, we have to make a motion as to where.
So the motion will be to approve the request for psychotropic medication process you do for a 6-month variance.
Seconded.
The motion has been put on the floor to approve a 6 months variance for CHS to have a continuing variance on psychotropic medication. All those in favor?
I just have a question. I think the motion made by Dr. Cohen was that this should not be a continuing variance. This should be a limited variance, as I believe it has been in the past, for a period of 6 months.
That is what I meant to say.
Okay, could you please restate the motion for clarification? And for
Yes,
the record?
I would move that the request for the psychotropic medication variance on our standard on psychotropic medications be for 6 months, and it not be it be revisited every 6 months.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion that has been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? One abstention. Motion carries. Now, you had a variance request regarding tuberculosis screening.
Yeah.
I think that was going to be a separate motion.
Yes.
Is there?
I would move that we give a 6-month variance to continue the use of other mechanisms than PPD for tuberculosis. This is critical to the function and also to the city's attempt to contain tuberculosis. So,
Could I hear a clear statement for a motion and then a second?
Oh, give it again?
If you
I'm
can
sorry.
make it,
The doctors were conferring.
No, we weren't.
you want to, Dr. Sherman, Ms. Sherman, you want to,
I'm not a doctor.
but do you want to classify the motion so that it makes clarification?
I don't know what, I believe Dr. Cohen has made the motion, and I believe this is also for a limited 6-month variance,
That's correct.
and I'll second that.
Motion has been delivered, second by Board Member Sherman. All in favor of the motion? All opposed? Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we will now turn to, I think it's one item now for board member discussion. And that item is regarding programming and the $17 million reduction by the Department of Correction, or proposed reduction by the Department.
Chair, I'm going to recuse myself from this conversation because I'm on the board of the Osborne Association, which is something that I've declared to the Conflict of Interest Board for the city. And the agreement was just that I would recuse myself if anything involving Osborne came before the board. Thank you.
So noted, Board Member Bedard. So we'll wait a few seconds so Board Member Bedard can excuse herself from the room.
Right.
Okay, so the Department of Corrections stated intent to cancel $17 million in contracts with nonprofit organizations to provide crucial programming and discharge planning services for people in custody effective July 1, 2023. So this is for discussion for the board, and
I think for discussion from there are two senior members of the Department of Correction here. Could you elucidate this at all for us? Tell us why you decided to cut this in your budget rather than something else, or maybe you have other things, and if you could tell us what those are too.
they still.
Can you hear me? No, my apology. I didn't realize this was for us to discuss as listed. I thought it was for a board discussion. But I will say this, and permit me to begin in the following way. My first 2 years out of college, I worked in programs in correctional facilities. So I understand the importance of programming. I understand the importance of programming in terms of concerns about idleness and violence, but I understand it more in terms of educating people who are with us who often come in without skills. Today marks the graduation of people with GED exams, and a program done with the Board of Education. And to me, there's nothing more important we can do than bring people who are brought to us leave with a GED if they don't have it. Now, having said that, I realize that $17 million has been cut from programs. And I'll say only this. The mayor told us that there needed to be a 4% cut, the same 4% cut as for every agency in the city. There may be one exception, but otherwise it was across the board. That number is $47 million. We couldn't get to that number without a $17 million cut in programs. The other things that we could have cut were facility maintenance, nutritional services, commissary, and wages for incarcerated individuals. I consider the $17 million a very unhappy cut. But there are times when you have to cut because you're told to cut and you have no other choice. And so we did. This item was added to the agenda on Friday. Francis Torres, who you all know, couldn't be here because of the late notice. I don't know anyone, and I think you'll agree with this, who is more committed to programming than Francis Torres. Her view is that she can make this up, by in a variety of ways, including technology, including more congregate programming, and including changing titles of people so that people who wouldn't be doing programming under their existing title would do programming. Francis Torres says we can accomplish it. Would I be happy if the $17 million came back? For sure. But when you're told you have to cut 4% and the largest part of your budget is staff, correction officers, it is hard to find $47 million, or even $17 million. So we cut. If you say to me, once again, am I happy about it? No. There are things in life that are beyond one's control. This was one of them. We'll see what happens as it plays out in City Council, but that is what happened here.
Yes, so 30%, it's $17 million cut. 4% of your budget would, it's more than the personnel, relative to the amount of program support you give. It's a pretty large amount. And could you please, and I don't think you can say that it represents sort of a reasonable thing relative to the personnel, but could you tell us what programs you are cutting?
I can tell you what we're not cutting.
No, could you tell me what you're cutting?
I'll start with what we're not cutting,
Oh,
and then
I didn't ask that
we'll go
question.
from there. We're not cutting any reentry services. We're not cutting any programming in mental health housing, and we're not cutting any substance abuse programming. We will be cutting congregate programming done by organizations that both you and I think have a rich history on Rikers Island. That will be cut, and that we will try to make up.
So what programs are you cutting?
The programs that were done by those outside providers.
So this is all outside provider? I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of it.
Well, it's all outside of provider money, yeah.
But is there any other outside provider money?
Excuse me, Dr. Cohen.
I'm just trying to understand what programs.
Yeah, I just don't want it to be
There is,
argumentative.
my understanding is there is outside of provider money for reentry programs. That is not being cut.
I see.
Okay.
Yes, Board Member Felipe.
No, I mean, I think, I don't know if you could answer more, what do you mean by not cutting reentry programming? Like, would people be able to enroll in programs of the ones, Fortune and Osborne run, but in Rikers before they go home?
I'm
Do they
going
have to wait when they go home?
I'm going to apologize. Your question suggests that God is often in the details. I don't know the details, but Francis Torres does. We'll provide them to you. But what I've been told is we are not cutting reentry programs.
Thank you for that. I have a couple of questions when you said all outside providers are being cut. And my guess is that correctional staff will start delivering those programs to meet minimum standards of 5 hours of programming per day.
Correctional staff, for the most part, will do that, yes.
So here's the other question, I guess, contradicting again from Mr. Cumberbatch's, thank you for your statement about staff being short. Yes, I took notes. I guess safely how 17 million can be cut in correctional staff to deliver it when correctional staff doesn't even have the staffing capacity to do correctional staffing of security and safety. So the reason this was on for the board discussion is because you have correctional officers who are the custody, safety, and security of a facility stating they're overworked, they're exhausted, 18 hours, shortage of staff, but then you have a cut that says correctional staff is going to deliver the programs on top of the security and custody that is going on. And I guess I'm struggling with how is that even possible when we're having this conversation?
I hope this ends your struggle. But correction officers do not deliver programming. They deliver security and safety during programming. Many of them, because of their backgrounds and skills, are helpful, as you might imagine. But programming is delivered by a programming staff that is comprised of civilians. And Francis Torres believes that in a variety of ways, we can make up for that funding. I can't tell you more than that. I don't know more than that. But I want you to know that she is as thoughtful about this as can be. And if you need more information from her, I'll provide it in a hot second.
Thank you. I guess the only other question I have is how many program staff are actually staffed versus how many program staff are being eliminated. But we can follow up.
We're not eliminating any program staff.
No, I'm talking about the correctional staff the contractual staff that comes in. to deliver programming right now is around, from Osborne, is 90 people. So I'm just wondering how many program staff is already staffed in the facilities that's gonna make up for 90 bodies being removed.
I'm going to.
And we could follow up with that one-on-one.
Just also, board member, we can refer to the record from a previous board meeting.
No, that's fine, and we'll follow up.
And Deputy Commissioner Torres can confirm, but I know she reported at a previous board member of on-staff, programming staff, and contracted staff for a total of 541.
Yep.
I don't remember the number, but
And Chair,
we have it on the record.
She reported at City Council that she thinks she can fill the gap. And so if you need more information, I'll try to get it to you.
Yeah. I do have a question, and this is, I assume, in the category of for follow-up. Is there a documented plan for how this transition, which is supposed to happen in under 3 weeks, is going to happen? Does the deputy commissioner have a documented plan, both for how the corrections staff is going to step up and how the entire caseload currently being handled by the nonprofits will be transitioned to the department staff?
I can only answer this. 2 weeks ago at City Council, she said the plan was in development. There's 2 weeks have passed. I'll try to find out the status of it.
Okay, we would also like to see a copy of the transition plan. Thank you.
Good, I thank you, and I'm sorry that I'm not the ideal person to speak to these issues, but I thought someone from the department.
We really appreciate you taking the time, because we did not expect a response from the department on this, the discussion, so we really appreciate the effort.
Look, let me say this. I think Francis Torres is the expert, but the issue is an important one, and someone should stand up for the department, and so I'm happy to have the opportunity.
Our next order of business is to vote to go into executive session. Will a board member move to enter into executive session to discuss proposed litigation and personnel matter?
I make a motion.
So moved.
Go ahead.
Second, either way.
Is there a motion?
Yes, I move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so move. Will, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? At this time, the board will go into executive session, and we'll ask for all other non-board members to leave the room. And we will announce when we're back in session. Thank you.
Thank you.
The meeting is back in session, and we do have a quorum of members to continue the meeting. A couple of members will be returning shortly from a brief break. To give a report will be Vice Chair Deanna Hoskins at this time.
Thank you, Chair. So in executive session, the board discussed issues around access to video and discussed next steps we will take as a board. So that's all we report now from our executive session.
Thank you. At this time, if there's no further business at hand, I will take a motion to adjourn.
No, public comment.
Oh, no, my apologies. So we are at public comments on CHS?
Public comment.
Is there a list? Do we have a list for public comments? Because I didn't see a list.
It was Quarks.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't see a list, so I didn't.
Yeah, it's only 4 this time.
Okay. So we will go to general public comments period 2, and I think it's Jane Stanek. And please remember, you have 3 minutes. And Veronica Vela, if you can sort of get in queue, that would be very helpful.
I'm Jane Stanicky, and I think I've earned my...
Mike, closer, yeah.
I think I've earned my way here by spending 12 years once a week going to Rose M. Singer. Women are not small men. If women are not small men, why do we treat them that way? In the 1700s, when there were few women prisoners, there seemed no need for separate facilities. Then, predictably, the inevitable... Sure.
Okay.
I was describing why women are not small men.
Thank you.
I was saying in the 1700s, when there were few women prisoners, there seemed no need for separate facilities. Then, predictably and inevitably, issues of privacy, sexual exploitation, and sanitation were finally admitted and separate facilities created. So, why in the year 2023, since we're not in the 1700s, do we house men in a women's facility and expect different outcomes? Here, I do not refer to the assignment of trans individuals to Rosie's, but the DOC intention to move men into housing units at Rosie's. History has demonstrated repeatedly that when women share a facility with men, in each and every instance, it doesn't work well for the women. They lose out in programs, in recreation, in healthcare, and in all other services. This comment comes from a prison superintendent of 20 years experience, by the way. Housing men in one wing of Rosie's just doesn't make any sense at all. Given our history, it's just an abominable idea. Let me give you another example. I'm not berating the board on this, believe it or not. A few months ago, when there was just one woman and her infant in the nursery at Rikers, the nursery had to be closed because of some necessary plumbing work. So a plan was devised to have the mother and her 2-month-old infant go to Bedford, where there is a wonderful nursery, national reputation. It's absolutely terrific. They had the room. This has been done before. The plan was set. So it was sent up the line to DOC. Up the line said, no. Here was the DOC decision. Send the 2-month-old to ACS and send the mother to general population. A 2-month-old infant who knows the smell and sound of its mother shipped off to ACS. That is as anti-family as it's possible to be. I know that the board is an oversight body. I happen to believe that you have influence. I urge you to use that influence to get women off the island. It is crystal clear the mayor is slow walking close Rikers. That's just not in the cards. If you got 4% cut, what makes you think you're going to get billions of dollars to get a new Rikers? You're not. Get the women off the island. And I'm speaking to BOC. I know it's not your job, but you could spearhead this effort. I know you could. We really have to have that happen. More years of the women being collateral damage to the men is just terrible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stanek. It's just for the record, this board has commissioned a committee to address women concerns and issues in the jails, which is chaired by board member Becky Pitts, and they are doing their work to address a range of women issues in the jails. So we look forward for a report and some recommendations from that committee.
And just let me take a moment. What we've done so far is in the incubation stage, but we are earnestly going to look at both sides of the situation. The women who work there uniformed in civilian and the women who live there. And we are noticing that there are a lot of similarities between the two. And I think when we have concluded our research and when we put out our report, it will show that. And hopefully we can, some recommendations will result from the finished product.
Hi, I'm Veronica. I'm with the Prisoners' Rights Project of the Legal Aid Society. We continue to be alarmed by the department's ongoing attempt to eliminate all lingering transparency into what's happening in the jails. Commissioner Molina continues to act like he was just appointed and needs to reform the dysfunctional system he inherited. But it's been well over a year, and all we've seen are, instead of steps towards reform, are backward steps towards entrenching the culture of violence and dysfunction. Where are the robust measures intended to improve conditions and change the culture? All I see is a department concerned more with bad optics and bad press than with trying to fix the harms that it continues to cause. As the board and the people in this room know, DOCS has made many recent actions only to hide what's happening in the jails. The department stopped informing the public of deaths in custody and only admitted that it had changed this procedure once they were called out by the court monitor in Nunez for not telling him about 5 very serious incidents involving deaths and injuries that were not reported. And instead of ensuring that people in custody do not reach near-death conditions because of brutality or medical neglect, the department compassionately releases people with fatal medical conditions and then claims that those people should not be counted as deaths in custody. We also know about the efforts earlier this year to limit the board's access to real-time Genotech video, footage from inside the jail. What legitimate purpose exists for that? And we've all heard today about the efforts to reduce the access to the jails by the nonprofit organizations that produce programming in the jails, which not only will take away the opportunity for people for things like vocational training, but also be one fewer set of eyes in the jail to be witness to the inhumanity that occurs in the walls. We're also seeing at Legal Aid the effects that this clear institutional mandate to obstruct in our legal cases against the department. In our case about the absolutely essential environmental issues like fire safety, ventilation, and sanitation, the department takes every opportunity to interpret its obligations narrowly and then still fails to comply with them. They refuse to work with our court-appointed monitor to access information that the court monitor is supposed to have access to. And they won't answer our questions about the recent fire in NYC, and they wave off our concerns about fire watch posts being abandoned at West Facility. In Agnew, a case about medical care access, they first claimed that it was impossible for them to provide access to medical care. Imagine that. And now, all evidence to the contrary, they claim the problem is entirely fixed. Tell that to the thousands of persons not being produced to their appointments every month. And in Nunez just today, the court monitor voiced concerns about DOC's troubling lack of transparency. We learned that the department leadership urged the monitor not to tell the court about these troubling incidents of individuals rushed to the hospital, 2 of which died. Why? Because it would make the department look bad. We are dealing with a department that thumbs its nose at its legal obligations and is prepared to manipulate information in order to mislead. So I urge this board to robustly execute its oversight powers. We have seen the department, likely in cooperation with the mayor's office, act to hamstring the board and attempt to silence those who scrutinize its claims and its actions. But we have also seen many of you fight back, and thank you. We, the advocates, and everyone concerned about people who live and work in the jails ask that you continue to actively resist the efforts to reduce the board to irrelevancy. The minimum standards take a lot of time and work to promulgate. They are yours to enforce. Please do so. Where is the discussion about the recent DOC directive that is in direct contravention with the minimum standards? Please, we urge you to use all your powers to visit the jails, investigate complaints, review video footage, question and confirm independently every representation from the department, issue reports, question and scrutinize every variance request, and issue notices of violation that have some teeth. We are relying on you to have a robust execution of your duties and to use all of your influence. These times dictate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is Sade Leonard, if you can prepare yourself to come forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Klinger. I'm a jail services attorney with Brooklyn Defender Services. Thank you for the opportunity to provide some comment today.
Sorry, I can't hear you. Can you please speak?
Well, I don't feel well, so I'm going to keep my mask on. Regarding, I'll start again. My name is Michael Klinger. I'm a jail services attorney, Brooklyn Defender Services, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide a comment today. Regarding the proposed $17 million in programming cuts, we joined with our colleagues and other defender organizations, as well as the Osborne and as well as at Osborne and the Fortune Society, to urge the department to reverse this decision and restore the funding and programming. Leading organizations like Osborne and Fortune provide more than just the programs that the department contracts for. They provide motivation, rehabilitation, connection to the outside world, all of which reduces harm to the community of people in jails and also, critically, to the communities to which they'll be returning. As one example of many, a BDS client whom I will refer to as Mr. M was sentenced to a city year and while at Rikers was able to engage with Fortune Society, who provided skills training, classes, and reentry planning. After leaving Rikers, his existing connection to Fortune allowed for easy continued access to their services. He is currently enrolled in Fortune's education program to obtain his GED, and he completed a 10-week internship. Mr. M has told his BDS caseworkers that he is pursuing full-time employment and making plans for his future, with Fortune playing a significant role in his decision-making. The department institutionally lacks the expertise, the cultural competence, and the community presence to deliver these programs in this way. Moreover, the proposed savings, $17 million, is dwarfed by the troubling $33 million no-bid proposed contract with Keefe Group, reported in recent days, for commissary services that are overpriced, unreliable, and unanswerable to their own consumers, as well as the expanded contracting with Securus to broaden the surveillance net on people in custody and their communities in the city. With respect to the Nunez litigation, we commend the board for including the recent monitor reports on today's agenda. Those reports highlight a lack of transparency and information sharing that the board has already experienced in its loss of meaningful access to video from the city jails. In recent weeks, the department failed to notify the monitor directly and immediately after deaths in custody or resulting from time in custody, and subsequently announced that it will no longer publicly disclose when there is a death in custody. Just this morning, the monitor asked the court to order the department to disclose this information. As legal aid pointed out, it is notable that the monitor finds such an order necessary after so many years of the monitorship. In public responses to the monitor's reports, the administration appears to argue that public knowledge of tragic events in the city jails is itself a problem. We disagree. The public's awareness of the actual conditions in the jails is critical to keeping the administration focused and accountable. That means consistently sharing reliable, accurate information with the board, the monitor, and the public. Under these circumstances, the board's access to video and its meaningful exercise of oversight is now more crucial than ever, and we appreciate the board's recommitting itself to its task. And just finally, we commend the board's decision to again afford members of the public, critically including those formerly incarcerated and their families and community members, the opportunity to speak and be heard at these meetings. Thank you.
Sade Leonard and Natalie Forenzo, if you can prepare yourself.
Good afternoon, board. My name is Sade Leonard. I'm a city correction officer, but I stand before you today just not as a city correction officer. I'm a God-fearing woman, I'm a mother, and I'm a United States Air Force war veteran. I asked you guys to listen to my story about being a sexual assault victim. Not only was I sexually assaulted once, but I was sexually assaulted twice in RNDC, and little to nothing was done. The first time I was entering a special area, the barbershop, the inmate was in the hallway. He groped my behind, unprovoked. I was humiliated, angry, needless to say. Nothing was done. No one comes to work to be touched and sexually harassed and sexually assaulted. The second time, on June 21st, 2021, I relieved the officer who worked 24 hours, no meal, no sleep, no relief. Happy to see me. I get on the floor, 5 minutes later, an inmate touched my butt and my vagina area. Humiliated. And he told me in my face, that's what you get for coming here. Who comes to work in those conditions and to expect those type of reactions? And nothing was done. Little to nothing was done. The same officer that relieved me with no meal for 24 hours had to come back and restrain the same inmate. The inmate left the housing area for 5 to 10 minutes and was returned to the housing area while I was still there, no relief. So I had to watch him, nothing happened, come back, look me in my face again. Who deserves that? That is unfair. Unfair. I can honestly say that I fought for all of you in this room for your freedom without even knowing you guys, for your freedom of speech, and I will do it again honorably. But I'm asking you guys to hear me out when I say this. Sexual assault and sexual abuse in the Rikers Island needs to stop. And you guys have to take seriously our rights as women working in these conditions, that something has to be done. The law has to change. They have to feel a deterrence for what they're doing. It's not good. It's not a good feeling. I'm a mother. I have anxiety. I have to see a therapist. This is not an easy thing to come over and overcome, and to speak to you on this day. Those are one of the worst days of my life. And I ask that you guys hear me and take it seriously, and that it's on the agenda each and every month that this needs to stop. No one comes to work to be sexually harassed and sexually abused. It needs to stop. Thank you. Thank you.
I just would like to acknowledge, thank you for your bravery and your voice to speak, but also really discussing as a women's group with Ms. Pitts, and I sit on that committee as well, as to what is the process so we can formally document and actually move this agenda forward. So we hear you. I just needed you to know that.
Thank you.
We all hear you. Yeah, we all hear you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Now it is.
This one.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Before I begin my testimony, I do want to thank the board for what, in my personal opinion, has been the most effective meeting and meaningful agenda that we've seen in months from you. So that doesn't go unnoticed, although today I'm here primarily to talk about what further can be done and what I've seen in my role at New York County Defender Services. I do want to say that. My name is Natalie Fiorenzo. I'm a corrections specialist at New York County Defender Services. As a corrections specialist, I have a direct channel of communication with our incarcerated clients. This gives me both the ability to advocate for our clients' needs and direct insight into what's really happening, the current state of Rikers Island, which at the moment is really just crippled by chaos. We've all read the Monitor's reports detailing the grueling events that occurred in the past few weeks in the month of May. But frankly, as advocates, we've been screaming at the top of our lungs about the life-threatening conditions that created those incidences for years. Let's not forget what happened even before this, before the last board meeting that didn't happen on April 6th when a fire ravaged through the North Infirmary Command, injuring both detainees and Department of Corrections staff. We still don't really have answers about that. How was the fire able to cause so much damage before it was eventually put out? Why were detainees put directly back in that housing area just hours after it was burned to dust? And why wasn't there an effective fire safety protocol in place, most importantly? These are questions that the victims, their families, and the public deserve answers to. It is for this reason that on May 2nd, the public defender offices of this city submitted a joint letter to the board asking that you publish an independent report on that fire and add the topic to the May agenda. It was not on the May agenda. It was not on today's agenda. We hope to see in the days and weeks following this hearing the board's serious attention to that matter and ultimately a full report about the failures and the negligence of the department and the department's leadership that occurred on that day. Let's also not forget the newly published ESH directive that was released on March 29th, in which the Department of Corrections gives themselves greater discretion to place children in what is effectively punitive segregation by another name, going against years of precedent set by this board. Individuals aged 18 to 21 will now be subject to the torture that is enhanced separation housing, which includes the use of restraint desks, forced to sit with both of their ankles and one arm shackled while they participate in programming. You're all seated right now, and you've been seated there for over 3 hours. Imagine if the entire time you've been sitting here, you have one hand chained to that desk. Now imagine both your legs are spread the width of your chairs because your ankles are also shackled. You can't shift around. You can't go to the bathroom. You're sitting here for the entire 7 hours of your programming. Also, this entire time, you're supposed to be actively engaging in this programming. If you don't, your 45 days could be 60 days, could be 120 days, or even longer. Could you sit through that right now? Seriously? Could you have done that at age 18? Bottom line is, Rikers Island is deadly and needs your very genuine oversight. Our asks for you today are the following. Please conduct and publish a board investigation into the fire on April 6th. Place the fire on next month's agenda so that the Board of Correction can question the department in the eyes of the public and work with the department to limit the use of restraint desks and placement of young adults in ESH. We also have submitted a written testimony with the same asks. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Rachel?
I just want to add,
Excuse me, Dr. Cohen, you're out of order at this time.
Oh, I was in one of the ESH restraint units, and to amplify your comments, there was no individualized basis for putting people there. There were no hearings. There's no due process, and we will follow up on that. Thank you.
Is this Rachel? What is your last name? How do you pronounce it, please?
It's Schneiderman.
Schneiderman? Thank you.
Schneiderman. Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Schneiderman. I'm also a corrections specialist at New York County Defender Services, and I just want to echo my colleague Natalie's sentiments and thank the board, especially for putting the comments of people in custody ahead of DOC comments. That is much appreciated. Today, I want to emphasize that not only does Rikers continue to present a chilling reality for anyone forced to spend time there, as has always been the case, but to underscore that right now, this current moment leads me and many of my colleagues to be particularly fearful about the direction Rikers and the Department of Correction is heading. I want to share a story. A few weeks ago, I was talking to a few other advocates, and we were just talking about what's going on in Rikers, and someone mentioned the tragic and avoidable death of Mr. Rubu Zhao. And we all shared the sentiment of being especially concerned that something like this could happen in a PACE unit, supposedly the kind of unit with the highest level of care and the highest level of supervision. And another person mentioned Reuben Blau's recent article about James Carlton, which had been published that day. The article detailed the life-altering injuries that Mr. Carlton had suffered as a result of a use of force that landed him on life support and eventually paralyzed from the neck down. This news was particularly disturbing to me and our office because we had received similar news the previous weekend, just a few days prior to this conversation. And I shared that with these colleagues and said that our client, Joshua Baez, was also on life support after going to the clinic for a headache. The amount of information provided to us from CHS and DOC was incredibly limited, and we were at a loss as to how Mr. Baez, a young man at the age of 31, could so quickly deteriorate. And we were all certain that there was more to the story and anxious and terrified for what we would learn in the coming days. And then another colleague shared a similarly harrowing story of someone who was at the time in the ICU because he was brought within an inch of his life after DOC officers let him languish in an intake cell for hours after he had been beaten senselessly. The group of us that were all discussing sat in silence, all horrified that not only had we each individually learned of a tragic, avoidable, and life-threatening event happening to people in DOC custody, but that we had all experienced this collectively, that all of these events had happened in quick succession within a matter of days. And if we as advocates felt this, I cannot imagine how it must have felt to share a dorm with one of those people and to be forced to watch as DOC allowed unchecked violence to unfold and be filled with the creeping sensation that you might be next. And in the face of this violence, dysfunction, and loss of life, the department's only response has been to limit the public's access to information of this nature. They were evasive, inaccurate, and disingenuous with the information provided at every step of these tragedies. And then they formally announced that they would cease providing information at all when such tragedies occur in the future. Commissioner Molina and the department have sent the message that the lives at stake do not matter, and that what is most important is protecting the department's image. In this moment, board oversight is vital, and members of this board can no longer let the department's ineptitude go ignored. Thank you.
Thank you. Chaplain.
Can you hear me? Peace and blessings, everyone, including you too, Chair. I just want to highlight a couple of things very quickly. Dr. Gonzalez, I think that's his name, he was amazing, great presentation today. However, he kept talking about realignment. How does one realign back to a barbaric culture and torture and violation of human rights? So, coming from an academic perspective, I would like to get him on board to talk about his realignment, because after he said that for the third time, I was lost on how we're going to realign when the monitor was brought in because of the barbaric conditions. And speaking of the monitor, it doesn't take over $20 million in 8 years to fully understand what the people of New York have spoken to this board. Many of you have been around, many of you knew, but spoken to this board on the record about all the time, for free. $20 million. The city of New York has paid someone from Texas to tell this board what we tell you for free. And speaking of what we tell you, how dare you have the audacity to limit public comment to 10 speakers? 19 heartbeats died last year, 2022. And you're telling the people of New York that you're not even allowing their loved ones to come stand before you in one hearing to speak on the record. That's an insult to the people of New York. And speaking of the people of New York, I advocate every day for everybody in my community, officers included. And if you want receipts, I can give you some of captains and family members that I have assisted. And I say that because that committee, that women's committee, I want to be a part of it. You know why? Because I've stood on this record and spoke about officers not having bathroom breaks, officers not getting home on time. 7 years ago at City Council, I advocated for more funding for officers because they were then working 3 tours. This is not a new issue. This is an administration failing at every step issue. I've advocated for DOI to expand. That's when we brought in Serena and then Melina fired her the first day on the job. I advocated for this board to get more funding. Y'all wouldn't even have workers the way y'all do right now, even though you need more, if it wasn't for our advocacy. And I advocated for over $30 million in programming. So when they say they're cutting 17, ask them where the other 13 went. And I say all of this because I care. I say all of this because I show up. And I don't get paid a dime for what I do. But I care because I'm a New Yorker. And so I'm encouraging each and every one of you. Utilize your position of leadership and stand tall on it. And don't be wrong and strong. Be right, correct, and spearheading leadership and change in this city. And lastly, I'll say, Chair Sampson, it is time for you to resign. Peace and blessings.
Hello. I'm trying to find my speech. Hello, my name is Candy, aka Solitary Survivor, and I use the alias Solitary Survivor because I spent 1,168 days on Rikers Island. Out of those 1,168 days, I would spend 1,122 in solitary confinement. It's hard for me to come up here and speak because I still have a lot of nightmares, daymares. It's hard for me to go to sleep at night because of the torture. As she said, she was sexually assaulted. Well, I was sexually assaulted almost every day. Not by the inmates. The inmates didn't bother me. It was the officers that sexually assaulted me. It was the officers that gave me pills to take. It was the officers that told me to stop cutting my arm left to right, go up and down because it's not working. It was the officers that gave me industrialized detergent to swallow so I can choke and not be able to taste for weeks on top. But it was a blessing also because who wants to eat the food there? The food there was floating with maggots. I didn't know what a maggot was until I was sitting in my cell and I saw a piece of rice. I thought it was a piece of rice jumping up and down. So I banged on the door and I told the captain I need to speak to mental health because the food on the floor looks like it's moving. And then she said, oh no, that's just a maggot. And I said, wow, it's 1 million of them all over the place. And she said, oh, that's an OSHA issue. Have your parents call and call up OSHA. And I say that to say, not only was I being bitten by the rats, the mice, the roaches, the flies, the officers too, the doctors, the staff. It's disgusting. No one deserves to be in Rikers Island, not even the officers. As bad as they tortured me, I don't think they deserve to be there. They need to shut Rikers Island down. And I'm not saying move everyone to Paradise, but move them where they can get water, medical attention, mental health attention, especially the women there. I was in there and there was a woman who was pregnant. And they told her they put her in there for her own good. And she asked, can she get a double portion since she's pregnant? And they told her no, because it's the Bing. I try to commit suicide almost every day when I was in there. Like I said, swallowing pills, industrialized soap. I didn't have to starve myself because they didn't feed me anyway, but I cut myself whatever I could use, a pencil, a cup, a tray, whatever I could break. And I just feel so upset that there's still people in Rikers Island, there's still more Khalif Browders, there's still people dying. I'm not saying put people in Paradise, but I'm saying put them somewhere where they can learn from their behavior. Not go back out in the society and do the same thing again because they was tortured. Thank you so much for listening to me. If you have any more questions, I'll be there to answer them.
Thank you, Candy.
Yes, thank you, Candy. I can say that I have been on the record to talk about disparity in women PACE unit at Rosie's. That's something that we are, diligently looking at because it is a big concern to me and to this board. So we continue to follow up on those serious comments that you made. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I see that the board is very new. This is a new board compared to what I testified in front of previously before. My comments is towards Mr. Sampson. I just got off the phone with somebody that knows you pretty well, and I was so surprised how you handle certain people in here, even some of your board members. I see that you was very authoritative and you was very egotistic in your attitude. But one question I wanted to ask you, right? This is about issues that's going on in criminal justice. Are you willing to actually sit down with the members, the advocates, and sit down and discuss what's actually really going on that you don't know about, that's not actually being really said in this hearing right now? Because I noticed I became afraid at some of the things I heard, and I did 30 years in prison. And I became very afraid, especially when you had a correction officer stand up there and say, it's about security, when the biggest problem on Rikers Island is security. So what I wanted to know from you, not your board, right? Because I really want to know, are you willing, as the boss, or the one that has the authority on the board, to actually call the advocates in your office and sit down and talk with them? Or have you ever really done anything dealing with criminal justice? Because this is an ongoing problem. Every time we come, it's a different board, right? And we come with the same problem, but we don't get no results. You know what the results is? Y'all be quiet, y'all sit there, and nobody says nothing. Y'all just stand there and look like y'all looking now. What we need is results. What we need is problems solved, right? And we're not getting that. We don't want you to be mad at us because we keep coming in here telling y'all the same thing over and over. If we telling you the same thing and over, you don't think it's a problem? I mean, don't stare at me, because I've been staying for 30-some years and I still can't figure it out. You know that? That's what I'm trying to ask y'all. Y'all got appointed and you became the big guy on there. You use your authority. And the person that told me said that you was a straight shooter. When he told me that, I became afraid, because I seen how you acted on the panel, right? You wouldn't give some of your staff an opportunity to talk. You wouldn't give some of your staff an opportunity to answer questions. And I became afraid of you, because I said, when I get up there, he might do the same thing to me. So what I'm trying to ask you again, are you willing to sit down with us, person to person, and sit down and hear the issues? Because I ain't going to tell you what I went through for 30 years. Because I'll be saying the same thing over and over. What I really want to know, how do we solve these problems with all of y'all say? What is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? It's 9 of y'all on the board. Y'all been hearing problems all day. Now, how do we solve some of these problems? Do we get to some of these issues? Or we just come in here to talk so y'all can go back and write the paper and say, I listened to so-and-so. Or y'all go back and talk to the mayor, Adrian Adams, whoever they is, and tell them, well, yeah, we heard some of their problems. It's issues. Because I know one thing. You said, when that female officer said what she went through, you took the mic and said, well, yeah, we sorry to hear that, this, that, and other. But I know as soon as one of these females told you what happened to them in prison, you just sat there and nodded your head. So what are we here for? Let's be realistic about the issue. Are we going to solve the problem, or are we just going to continue to stand and hear the problem? Now, I'm talking to you again, Mr. Sampson. Are we going to meet, or are we not? I'm coming to you man to man. Let's forget the employment status. I'm coming to you as a man, talking to you as an advocate, talking to you as a person that's been formerly incarcerated, talking to your person that got all his educations, bachelor's, associates, all that while I was in prison. Now I want to know, do you really want to hear the problems that the advocate is telling you about that's going on? Because I seen when the correction officer got up there, one correction, she said, well, they assaulted this person, they assaulted that person. But one thing they never told you, what's the statistics on officers on inmates? They never told you that. What's the rape level of officers on female inmates? They never told you that. They never told you how they disrespect our families when they come in to visit. They don't tell you that. But they gonna tell you everything they wanna know, want you to know about what's going on with the officers. They ain't gonna tell you all that, everything that's going on wrong with the officers. So I wanna know, what are we gonna stand up here, sit here and do? We gonna sit up here and stare like y'all still doing, or we gonna get some questions and answers? Yeah, I'm listening.
Hello? We're going to get some answers.
I hope so.
Yeah. The committee that I'm the chair of, we recognize, like I said earlier, I don't know if you were here, the name of the committee is Women in the City Jails. Mm-hmm. Women who work and live in the city jails, mm-hmm. Okay? So that's the people in custody, the uniform, non-uniform staff. Mm-hmm. There are similarities across the board with all the women. Mm-hmm. There are people in custody that are being sexually assaulted.
Indeed so.
And there are people that are in uniform that are sexually assaulted.
I don't disagree.
And there are females who are civilians that work in a correctional facility that are sexually assaulted.
I don't disagree.
So one of the things that we're going to do, the committee is going to do, is we're going to come up with some evidence-based information. That's the first thing. You have to research it, then look at it, mm-hmm. and then problem solve.
Can I say one thing?
No. Yeah, you can. Go ahead.
I appreciate that. The man been telling everybody that all day, so I appreciate it. Mm. Right? Ms. Pitts,
yeah.
Let me ask you this one question. I know what you said about the women.
Yeah.
That was part. You said all three stages of the woman.
Yes.
How many average?
What about the men? What you gonna ask me?
No,
go ahead.
The men.
What you gonna ask?
I deal with both.
What you gonna ask me?
What about the women that's advocates? You willing to sit down with them?
Sure.
I hope so, because they got a story to tell.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. But you know what? After a certain amount of time, it happens. The same story happens to so many people. Okay, so.
You know something, Ms. Pitts? I work in a women's shelter.
Yeah.
I work in a women's shelter at night.
Right.
And when I go in that shelter at night, let me tell you something. I am scared to death of sexual harassment. When a woman, and they walk with their towels, I can't even tell them, yo, you got to go back in the room. You know what they tell me, my boss tell me? You can't say nothing.
What do you mean you're scared of sexual harassment?
What, man?
They gonna sexually harass you, these women? That's what you're saying?
They can put it on me.
Oh, okay. The last thing I want to say, and Mr. Sampson can speak for himself, but he is all about doing the work for this board. There are things maybe you think you know, and there are lots of things that you don't know. Mm-hmm. So he's relatively new to the board. There are a lot of behind the scene issues. So I would just ask you to just wait, look, and just wait and see what happens.
Again, and I'm not arguing with you. I'm not going to debate it. The bottom line is this, right? Whatever goes on behind the scene, that's between you, him, and the wall, right? What I'm saying, what goes on outside the scene is the most important part. Excuse me, ma'am, it's no funny. We got a lot of issues. Y'all got a lot of issues going on amongst y'all. None of my business. My business is what's going on out here. This is what I'm saying, Mr. Simpson. We seen the behavior out here ourselves. When a couple of y'all want to talk, we seen the behavior. I don't mind. I heard about them. One of his dear friends is a friend of mine, and I called him this afternoon. I was on the phone all afternoon with him. And he said the guy, stand up, we're nice, talk. He's trying to do the right thing and everything. So what you're telling me, ma'am, I already know.
I'm talking about behind the scenes advocacy.
Well, listen.
Things that we're trying to accomplish.
You're one person. Tell them to meet with us, and then we go. Thank you for allowing me to talk, and I hope that we can talk, sit down and talk.
What organization are you with?
No, I'm with Hall. We passed. Our bill is passed. Human internal to long-term solitary confinement, and I work for Canberra at night, right? Look, and it ain't easy. But I'm saying that has nothing to do with it. And I've been doing this advocacy. I've been home this summer, be 10 years, right? And I've been doing it ever since. And I said with the old guy when he was governor, I said with the last mayor and all that. That's nothing. I'm just on it. I'm very straightforward.
Me
I'm not
too.
gonna stand up here and lie to you or tell you any BS. Whatever you want to say. The first march on Rikers Island, we did. All that. What I'm saying to you is that we need help as human beings. We're not talking about formally.
We all understand that. Your message is received. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'd like to see you.
Hi, I was speaking earlier and I couldn't find my poem.
Oh.
I just wanted to know if I could just say my poem. It's less than 1 minute. Okay. Okay, because of COVID, I wasn't able to have mental health services, like everything went haywire. So someone from a program told me that I should write. So this is what I had written in about 3 weeks ago. I've tried to commit suicide, hence I'll try it again. However, every time I try, God doesn't allow me to die. I'm sorry. God vividly doesn't want me dead. Nah, not yet. I presume all of the times that I tried to commit suicide were not my times to go. I've tried hanging myself in a cell by standing on buckets. I assume God didn't want me to, quote unquote, kick the bucket. No, 'twas not my time to go. God decides when we go. God decides where we go and how we go. It's not our choice. God put us here and will take our souls when he's ready. I'm here for a reason. I survived solitary confinement for a reason. God put me in solitary confinement so I can see and smell exactly what goes on. Then he released me to tell it all, to tell everyone and everything what I've been through, what I've seen others go through, and what people now, today, right now are enduring. I've begged, prayed to God to just end my life. I've asked God to let me fall asleep and never wake up, for God knows my pain, has seen what I've gone through, heard my screams. I feel like if God loves me, why would he want me to relive these nightmares? That's because it's not about me. It's about everyone. If I had to suffer to save other people's lives, then that's fine by me. I'm the voice of our incarcerated loved ones and the voice of our deceived loved ones. I'm the voice of the Lord. The great Lord said, it's time to shut Rikers down and it's time to end solitary confinement worldwide. Just like Moses, the Lord told Moses what to do, let my people go.
Thank you, Candy.
Thank you, Candy.
Thank you, Candy.
I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. And first, okay, my name is Jennifer Parrish. I work at the Urban Justice Center Mental Health Project, and I'm a member of the Jails Action Coalition and the Halt Solitary Campaign. First of all, I just want to thank you all for being here. I was really convinced that after the executive session, most of you would leave. So thank you for staying and listening to the public comment. I've been coming to these board meetings for at least a decade now, and I've seen many different chairs and then many different board members and observed them conduct meetings and hearings that were controversial and lots of people wanted to testify. And never at any of those did they limit the public comment. So I hope you will get rid of the rule. You've extended it from 3 to 10, but there should be no limit on public comment. I'm very glad that you gave an additional section at the beginning, and I understand maybe you have to limit how many people speak then, but don't limit the rest of it, because at this time, with all that's going on with Rikers, you need to hear from everybody. And I think that everyone who stood up here has brought to you an important issue for you to consider. And I know that the commissioner doesn't seem like he wants to share information with you, so I think you really need to hear it from the public and from the correction officers who are coming here to tell you the same thing. But I'm very concerned that there were some key things that should have been on your agenda that weren't, and I hope you'll address them at future board meetings. One of them is related to solitary confinement. This board has been invested in trying to deal with solitary confinement for more than a decade now. And it's not dealt with. There are people sitting right now in solitary confinement. At NYC, we know that's basically lockdown. They want to call it involuntary protective custody. It's not. People are locked down all day. And now even the little television that they added to people's cell, that's not even working. There was no discussion of that. There was no discussion of the new ESH directive, which was mentioned by the public, that it violates the board's rules, and the Department of Correction adopted it anyway. That's a directive. That's a permanent thing that they're putting in place in violation of your rules. They also you haven't talked at all about the mental health units. The deaths that have happened on the mental health units, and Correctional Health Services wasn't even asked about that at all. They're closing AMKC. What does that look like? Where are they putting people? There are a lot of mental health units there now. That should have been asked about. We're starting summer next week. There's always an issue about heat on Rikers Island. Nothing asked about their plan for that. And you had the contracts on to discuss as a board, but you didn't have the Department of Corrections here to tell you what that plan was. They testified at the city council. At that point, they didn't have a plan. Well, now they're 2 weeks closer to it happening. They should be presenting you with a plan. So those are things that you need to hear from the department, and I encourage you to do that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our public comments. Thank you, everyone who attended and participated in today's meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled to take place on July 11th, 2023 at 1 p.m. At this point, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.